Hey, Barbarian here! Are you a game master looking for an amazing game world rich in lore and strange new creatures to run your D&D or Pathfinder 2 game in? Well, look no further than the world of Battlezoo, Indigo Isles. The world of Battlezoo, Indigo Isles contains everything you need to set sail for adventure. Except maybe a boat. You're probably gonna have to buy your own boat. But the book itself contains a detailed overview of key locations on the Indigo Isles, dozens of story hooks and NPCs, and details on the ancient spiritual religion known as the Eld. Wow, that sounds spooky. Don't forget to take your weapons with you. You'll also get 15 new dragons as monsters, featuring the entire family of wild dragons from the Battlezoo Ancestry's Dragons book to help you murderize your players' precious characters. And you'll get gobs of new magic items to make them feel like they might have a chance. But they won't, will they? What's more, there are tons of new character options, 10 new ancestries, and new archetypes and subclasses and heritages, and seven familiars native to the Indigo Isles. Remember, the world of Battlezoo Indigo Isles comes in 2 versions, one for D&D 5e and another for Pathfinder 2. Oh yeah, and they're releasing the PDF right after the Kickstarter ends. If you'd like a new fantastical world to amaze your players with, click the link below and back the Kickstarter today.
Look, we're live. Right in the middle of an argument. We're live. Like right in the middle. And we are finally hooked up with Kelsey. We hung out a lot at Gen Con, and then we sent texts, and then she disappeared. But she came back. She finally said, "Oh, I'll friend you." And that way you will come through instead of the 10,000 texts I get a day. Yeah, it's like you're like Professor Dungeon Master, only on Discord, and you're in your private messaging. But
he's harder to reach than me, I think. I don't know. I didn't realize that I had this Discord. It's like apparently people can't contact you on Discord unless you're friends with them, or I have that setting enabled. And so I looked in there and I was like, oh my God, there's so much in there.
You were like,
it's hard to see the requests on Discord.
Yes.
Just to be clear, I always miss that. But if they're in your server or are friends with you, they can usually ping you if they're in any shared server. And if they're not, then they can't.
Yeah, so we fixed that. But sorry everybody who's you've
sorry everyone. Sorry the world. Like hello. And yes, we're back. Now it's been 2 weeks since Gen Con, but we met at Gen Con on your birthday, and I heard you had 2 birthdays. I heard you had a birthday and then another birthday.
I got to. That was really exciting because I don't even normally celebrate my birthday anymore because I'm too old now. So it was like a double whammy this year.
You have a Gen Con adjacent birthday too.
Yeah. Oh, is yours as well? Happy birthday.
Yes. Thanks. Yeah, mine has been, and when I was working at Paizo, I'd have to work all through my birthday.
I know.
But this year it was one day before Gen Con technically, but if I had gone to Gen Con, I would have definitely already been there on my birthday.
Which day was it?
It's kind of fun.
Wednesday. Remember, Steven? You told me I couldn't take off, even though I usually take off on my birthday.
That's right. Well, Kelsey's was Saturday, so you guys are pretty close.
Yes.
Yeah. We're very close.
So,
birthday twins, almost.
Birthday twins, almost. Gen Con birthdays. That's fun. Well, I'm a December birthday. That's
Gen Con
birthday
fun. It's like because of Gen Con releases, it's true that like the Pathfinder playtest for Pathfinder 2, which you could consider to be like the first iteration of Pathfinder 2, a game that I worked on, co-created, has the same birthday as me. Because it actually came out on the exact same day.
Really?
Gosh.
Well, yeah, because it happened that my birthday was when the playtest was released. The final book came out one day after because, it changes which day is Thursday each year. But
that is so wild. I have to say, too, a funny thing about that. Like, you reminded me, and I just checked my calendar. Today is the 1-year anniversary of the day I finished writing the last draft of ShadowDark. It's literally today. So So I'm like, wow, like we have these coincidental like birthdays and days lining up with our like actual major projects. It's kind of funny how that
This is
how
how
that pans out.
numerology like started to exist back in the day, where people would just be like, look at these number coincidences. It must be a mystical property.
Yes.
Oh man.
Oh my
You guys
gosh.
have cool well, I got a cool birthday story. I'm starting to feel a little left out. Want to hear my cool I don't know if you know
Yes, I wanna hear
this
it.
birthday story, Mark. So I was born in Biloxi, Mississippi in the Air Force, because that's where my dad was. And I was
You were born in the Air Force?
Yes.
In the air.
In the air. No, I was born in
Of
In
Biloxi.
the Air Force. He was already in the Air
I
Force.
was already in the Air Force.
at
So my
birth.
dad was in the Air Force. And I was born on the stroke of midnight. Literally on the stroke of midnight. And they didn't know if I was born on December 8th or December 9th.
Wow.
And they had to look it up, and there was no internet.
Isn't it
back.
ominous that like the bell tolled, and as the bell
Yes.
tolled, you were born?
Yes.
It's
Yes.
pretty metal, I have to say.
And they had to look
what did
it up.
that mean?
Well,
Does
they
it
looked.
mean
They
that
didn't know. They had to look it up because they were like, "There's no internet back then." So they're like, "What do we do?" And they're in the end. It's the military. So they looked it up, and it turns out midnight is the last second of the last day. So I was born on the 8th, on the last second of the 8th,
okay.
and then 1 second more would have been the 9th.
Huh.
So
Was there any
Absolutely
ominous
awesome.
Latin chanting when you were
Probably.
born too, as the bell was
Yeah.
tolling midnight?
Probably, but
Right.
my birth
Did the
certificate
lights
says
flicker?
probably. Well, there was that was also where that's also when I was born. Right around that time was when Hurricane Irene hit, which was like the deadliest hurricane in history of America
Whoa.
back then. Yeah, on my birth certificate it says 2,400 hours. Just that's it.
That's
And
so
it's like,
cool.
I know. You see.
Mhm.
Look at that. Someone else, Joseph Morgan, said that his dad was in the Air Force and was born on midnight as well.
Wow.
So,
Again,
Wow.
with our
Wait,
strange
Steven,
connections.
that is weird.
Are you sure that you are not? Or no, so
They
I
were
guess you weren't
twins.
really in the Air Force. You're not. You were not the person who was actually in
No,
the
my
Air Force.
dad
You
was
can't
in
be
the
the
Air
same
Force.
person.
No, my dad was
Yeah.
in the Air Force. No, but
Airman
maybe.
Steven was born at
Yeah.
Yes.
24.
Oh, I see. You
hours.
and Joseph Brogan might be the same person. Maybe you just typed
Yes.
in a thing and were
No.
like, "With my alt account, Joseph Brogan."
Yes. But I just see there. I told you I have the craziest stories. That's all my life is weird stories, and it never ends. So, but
One after another.
now my birthday's in December, so it's not the same. But yeah,
Joseph is too young to be Steven.
Yeah, he's a little young because I was born. I'm not gonna say when. It was a long time ago. See this gray in my hair?
ancient times.
It's being an immortal lich. I mean, it's been a while now, so
Well, you know, I always thought I was born at the right time because being an 80s kid was fantastic. But the problem with being an 80s kid is like all this geekdom was just starting to bubble up to the surface, and it was mostly male oriented, and you were bullied for being a geek. And now it's celebrated, and everyone's a geek. And I'm like, maybe it would have been better to be a kid now as opposed to being bullied for liking D&D and video games and like and not a single woman I knew did it at all.
Now geek culture is ascendant, but you can be cyberbullied by not just the people who live near you, but
That's
people
true.
from all across the world.
That is true. I guess
free
you're
range
right.
bullying.
I guess you're right.
I would not want to be growing up on the internet. I was looking at some awkward like middle school pictures of myself, and I was like, thank God these are not on the internet. Like it's just never. Yep.
Yeah, I guess every generation has its own thing, but no. Then we get cool people like Kelsey, who's like, she is so into D&D, she does the most metal D&D clone ever. In fact, oh look who I got! I got my little sticker.
You got your sticker.
The one you gave me. Bob and I had. I showed it. Then
Bob Worldbuilder had the
whipped
same
out his
sticker.
too.
He pulled it out when Steven pulled it out on Wednesday.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then I was the only one who didn't have the sticker, so we couldn't do like the 3-sticker Captain Planet like combination.
Dang it! I'll save one for you, so you
like
can
a
have one
Voltron.
someday.
I'd rather do
Thanks.
a Voltron. We turn into something horrible.
There you go, Voltron, Defender of the Universe.
I love Voltron. It's always the same too. Every episode was exactly the same.
Yeah, Power Rangers too. Power Rangers was like my version of that, and every episode, the Rangers have to get in their Megazords and form what was it called? The Ultimate Megazord, the one where they all come
There was
together?
the Ultra Zord, but they usually didn't need that one. It just depended if the stakes were high. Yeah, I watched the Power Rangers for sure, and a little bit of Voltron. I'm still really impressed by the way that they like created Voltron out of a pastiche of several other anime. Just like they're like, well, we don't really know what's going on here, so we'll just make this entire other plot line that doesn't really remotely resemble the original source material. That was pretty impressive.
Voltron sort of did that, but what really did that was Spaceship Yamato. Because with the Yamato, that you look up, that's one of the most popular animes ever in history.
Wow.
It's really good. Like it still holds up. There's 3 stories. There's 3 seasons, and each season builds on the next. And long story short is they okay, I'm gonna be a super geek. Hold on a second. Watch this.
He's got something for it. He's gonna
What
show
are you gonna
us.
do? You're gonna show that you have your space battleship Yamato manga or something?
No, I had something better.
A model? Wait, I want to guess what it is.
Oh, he's got the ship.
I got the space
The actual space battleship.
Yeah, with
Dang,
the
it's
wave
such a
motion
cool-
cannon and everything.
It's a real it's a cool design. It's like more retro than
Well,
like,
you know what it is? So what they did in the anime is they took the battleship Yamato, raised it, and it sunk during World War II. They raised it from the ocean and turned it into a battleship.
That's so rad.
It is actually really rad. And here's the coolest part is that every week what happened is that something was going to destroy the Earth, and they had to race to find it and destroy it. And so the whole first season is them going to find and destroy this thing that was going to kill the Earth.
Are they like kaiju type things, or could it be anything that was going to destroy the Earth?
Well, this one, no, it actually was like, I don't know what it was. It was something that was coming to destroy the Earth. And then the second season was the Comet Empire. And what made it so good is that the bad guys from the first season carried over to the second season. And this is in the 70s. Like now this is like nothing, but as a kid, I'm like, oh my God. Like it was an actual plot. And then there was a third season, and it was incredible. And so they had this thing called the wave motion cannon, and anything in the wave motion cannon would get destroyed. And so every episode was the same. But once they couldn't use anything for like 3 minutes, and they were dead in the water. So every episode was them fighting and then line up the wave motion cannon, and then they would. All right, hold on. Did I mention this has sound? Hold on. Let me get the remote control.
I love this. We all have our weird little. Like I have my version of that era was Dragon Ball Z, so of course I have my little Goku on my desk all the time, and this was. You have to build up your spirit bomb or your Kamehameha wave to defeat the final bad guy, and that's what it has to be. So you fight until you get to that moment. And then there you are.
I don't remember how to make it make sound. I thought there was buttons on it or something.
There you go.
There was a remote control. We're getting really, really off topic, but
well, no, I think we just never were really on topic.
That's
yet.
true.
Right.
But look,
We
look, the
are
guns
nerds,
move.
so
Look at this, the guns move and everything.
This is the first 15 minutes, Steven, which is when you usually just have us schmooze until 3:15, and then we go on to the topic. Like
I know,
ostensibly.
There's
we
actually
have to nerd out. This is why we do what we do.
well, that's the thing.
Absolutely.
We have more fun. When we had Professor Dungeon, we did a show with Professor Dungeon Master and Baron, and we're like, I think we were just like nerding out for 2 hours, and people just watched us. Like that's what it
Thanks
was.
for watching.
Yeah, thanks for watching us just talk about stuff like that we were doing at Gen Con. Like that literally was it.
Admittedly, that battleship is pretty cool.
It's
Well,
it's honestly super cool.
It does. Wait, I can't find I'm really angry because there's wait, how do I think the batteries might be dead.
It has to have sound to
It does.
It
It sounds and lights. You could actually turn. It has a soundtrack too. All right, you guys talk amongst yourself. I'm gonna be right back. I gotta find this thing because now it's bothering me.
Okay. He's gonna find the soundtrack.
I'm gonna find the thing. Mark, you introduce us, talk about the Kickstarter, and then ask Kelsey about ShadowDark. I'll be right back.
Okay, so yeah, we are Roll for Combat. You probably know that if you're watching Roll for Combat live, but that is who we are. And we have a Kickstarter. Right now, it is ending. It's the end of the Kickstarter that's got something like 8 hours until it's over, and it is on kickstarter.rollforcombat.com, which I am currently typing into the chat. We are trying hard to hit our final stretch goal for the Toxicant Sentinel archetype that lets you use poison to defend these other sort of poison wardens who live on one of the islands in the Indigo Isles. So check it out. We are like almost halfway from the last stretch goal to this stretch goal, but it's going to be rough because there's only 8 hours. So I think we have a good chance of making it. Revos has asked where the Kickstarter is. I just put a link in the chat. So take a look. We'd love it if you want to back us. There's a few Kickstarter only special deal things that you will not get if you buy this later, including a free cloth map with every physical purchase. And every tier, even the lowest digital tier, gives you the opportunity to submit an island idea, which Steve and I will pick the best ones, and I will write up those islands and put them in the book. So you do not have to buy the super high tier island tier, which does exist, that automatically gets your tier in the book. To get in the book, anybody can contribute. We want to make a product that involves the entire community. So that's what's going on there. But to move onward to this episode's topic, we have Kelsey Dionne on here for the ShadowDark RPG, which was and is a super popular Kickstarter for a new OSR, I guess like 5e as a basis in some ways, but like very, very different RPG. And so I have only read some of ShadowDark because I got it last night, and I'm already excited by some of the things that I've seen here. So one of the things that I want to talk about, which right before we started, I saw it and I was very interested in it, is that in ShadowDark, it looks like everything is in initiative. Like in Pathfinder 2e, for example, and to a similar extent in 5e, there's like exploration and then you go into an encounter. But in ShadowDark, it looks like everything's an initiative. People take turns in or out of combat, and then time passes in real time unless you say, I want an hour to pass, which I think is really fascinating. And I need to read more details to see more about it. But I think that's cool. It reminds me, there was an indie RPG last year where like, I can't remember its name, but like everything was on a time limit and you lose after a certain amount of time passes, and like spells required you to do things like close your eyes for 30 seconds. And then when you open them, you can see a thing. And like they turned real world time into like the like cost or mechanic. So I just think that's a cool thing to do.
Thanks. That's really cool. I like the idea of also having like closing your eyes or having some other real world impediment for the gameplay. That's taken it to a new level. That's really cool.
So,
did Steven get his ship?
Also, we should mention our Kickstarter, which is trying to reach 90,000. Kelsey's did like 1.6 million, so we're not quite there yet. But
well, you guys are still doing really well. That's like top 5% of Kickstarter already.
To be honest, it's a small one. Our other ones did 300,000, but they were bigger. So that was
pretty good for a first Kickstarter.
Yeah, the first one ever was 300. Back then, that was pretty good, and I had no real audience. So I'm actually going towards the model of trying to do, because you probably know, it's like I'm trying to do less, trying to do like one book with just, because we've done everything. We've done the dice, and I got minis that we created.
We had plushies.
Plushies. Oh, yeah. I got to send you the plushies because Kelsey's a huge. Here's the plushie. Here, look. I told you we had plushies.
They're really cute.
Well, you give me your address. I'll send you all of them.
I will. Oh my gosh, I'm spoiled.
But
I'm gonna have to keep them from my dog. She can't touch them.
Well, because Kelsey's a huge Pokemon fan, and we are literally writing. Mark's literally writing Pokemon for Pathfinder and 5e. And it is only the hardest thing he's ever done, which now we know why no one does it because it's like impossible.
Yep. other than ones that have been big team projects like making Pathfinder 2nd edition, like as a solo project for RPGs, I've not had anything that was more difficult than making an entire system of powers and Eldamon that use them that have over 300 powers and 13 elements, each with its own play styles that are like the wood plant one that like plants on the battlefield that are difficult terrain, and then you can harvest them for special effects, and water with like high tide and low tide changing what it does, and all of these elements. It's a lot of work and a lot of play testing, but I think it's going to be a like ridiculously cool opportunity for people to play once we finish.
Yep.
Oh my gosh, that sounds like a truly epic undertaking. I was so fascinated when Steven was telling me a little bit about it at Gen Con. I was just like, you're the amount of customization that you can have is just, it is equal to or more than what Pokemon allows, which is just so cool. I was like, this is actually legit Pokemon style mechanics here. So I was so thrilled.
I'm stupid, so that's why this happens. So
I wouldn't say that, Steven. I would say that you are visionary, you are ambitious, and you want to make things that are just ridiculously cool.
Yeah. And when the barrier
that's true.
to difficulty is so high, and that's why no one's done it, then if you do it, it has an incredible amount of value to it. Like it's just something that's so unprecedented then.
It does have a ton of pre-orders, and actually even the books we got into Barnes and Noble, and they ordered a ton, and so did all the big box stores are pretty excited. So
Barnes and Noble wanted it. That's cool.
Yeah, we got I just got a lot of I got the stats yesterday. They said they're doing really well, so I was like,
congrats! Oh, that's
thanks.
So exciting.
Yeah, we just got that contract, so it's going to be. You should be able to find Battles of Bestiary and the Dragon book in about the next month, in Barnes and Noble. By the way, if you have questions for me or Mark or Kelsey, send them in. Super chats always get answered right away. And obviously do subscribe because we got lots of cool guests. And next week we're going to have Ben Milton from Questing Beast on because we're going to continue the OSR train and keep going. So let's see. We have a question here for Kelsey. Do you have a ShadowDark adventure? Do you have any ShadowDark adventure modules planned? I'm an OSE player, but compatible adventures would be of great interest. I'm converting your Scarlet Minotaur adventure. Just a one thing that I could mention is I know Baron did his itch.io adventure contest, and they submitted like over 100 adventures for ShadowDark. So that's one place I know you can find adventures.
Yeah, there's tons. Like I've been so excited at the amount of third-party adventures and design in general that I've seen from people. There's a ShadowDark adventure written by Sursa Victory that he's giving away for free. That was one of the first pieces of content. It was actually available when the ShadowDark Kickstarter began, and he just won an ENnie for it. Like for best free product, I think he got the silver medal. So I was like, a ShadowDark adventure just won an ENnie. And Sursa is so deserving. He's just an incredible designer, and you can get it totally for free. It's called Tomb of the Jaguar Princess, but I can find the link to it. But so there's tons of really high quality stuff coming out that I'm just blown away by. And I'm always planning on writing more stuff. I have a zine for ShadowDark called Curse Scroll Zine, and each one has an adventure in it. That's sort of keyed to the power level of the zine. So more of those coming, probably some standalone adventures coming. I'm trying to get one written for October so that I can use it at GameholeCon. So we could maybe test it there and then put the finishing touches on it. So there's adventure writing is my favorite thing to do. It's actually like what I did before I wrote ShadowDark. So part of making the whole system was so I could write adventures for it.
So I actually have a question about the adventures for you. So I started my professional career with Goodman Games running DCC, which was based on 3.5. And that's Dungeon Crawl Classics. And I love the Dungeon Crawl Classics. And that's not OSR, but what he did is he made it look like OSR type content because it was black and white and he had the original artist. And it was
shirt. Here it is.
Oh, well, there you go. You're wearing a DCC shirt, kid. There you go. And it was very, very cool. And then eventually he made DCC, which is very deadly. But the thing about those adventures
I'm seeing a discussion where some people say that DCC is OSR. by the way.
The new
Not
one.
everyone,
I think
not
it
everyone
is.
agrees.
No, I'm
not
talking about the
everyone
new.
agrees.
The new one is. I'm talking about the original. The original
Oh, okay.
Dungeon Crawl Classics was literally 3.5.
Oh,
It was
you're
a
just
line
talking
of
about the
adventures.
adventures.
Yeah, the adventures,
from
and
DCC
in fact,
before they made a DCC OSR.
Here's one of the
system.
only
Got it.
4th edition Dungeon Crawl Classics. Look, it actually says this adventure is
Yep.
4E compatible.
I understand.
Ooh.
And
I understand now that
I
you were
worked on
talking
this
about
one.
the
Right.
adventures and not the system. So
Right.
That is
that confused
confusing.
me for literally over a year now. Then because you've been talking about it in all of these episodes
Oh,
that I've
because
been on
it
the
is a
show, and
little-
I always thought
Yeah.
you were playing the DCC RPG. Although if I
Yeah.
guess put the dates together, I should have realized it was not at the correct time.
Right,
Well, they
right.
turned it from a I always
Well-
that caught me up at first because I was like, wait a minute, it used to be an adventure line for 3.5 and
It
a little
is,
bit
it
of 4E,
was.
and then it became the name of the game system. Which,
Correct. 'Cause
in my opinion, the game system is an old school revival game. But
Yeah.
yeah, because what
no one
happened
agrees.
is the 4E OSR, OGL, everything's O. The OGL was so ominous that this was literally like one of the only things they ever published for 4E, and
Mhm.
that was it. They didn't really do much, and then he started his own line, and that's what became Dungeon Crawl Classics, what we know today. I'm talking about these. These are the original 3.5 modules.
Yeah, I remember
Mhm.
those two.
Right.
Yeah.
So my point being is that if you look at these modules, they're thick. Like these are real adventures. Not that yours aren't, but I was asking Baron about this because I was interested in writing an adventure for ShadowDark, and he's like, "Oh, they should be like 6-8 pages." So what is the sweet spot? Do people just want really short one shots and little ones like this, that are just
Right.
like just a map, and then you just go
Yeah.
through it? Or are people looking for actual mini campaigns that can last several, sessions? I'm just not sure, where's the sweet spot for OSR? Because I'm not sure.
I think I have an opinion on this, which is funny. And I think that for an OSR style game, exploration is it's probably the most prominent pillar.
Mhm.
If we talk about, like the general 3 pillars of gameplay that people generally agree are true. I think that exploration is by far the most emphasized, and for that to work with the procedural dungeon crawling and systems, you need a
Mhm.
larger dungeon. You need a dungeon that is sort of a kind of a classic style, freeform,
Mhm.
looping, multi-level, jockeyed, whatever style dungeon. And so I think I think that, in my opinion, an ideal length of a dungeon would be starting around the 30 room mark or higher, to really take advantage of ShadowDark's core systems. That's not to say you couldn't write a shorter one. Like I have a bunch of mini adventures out that are only like between 9 and 10 rooms, or maybe even 5 and 10 rooms. And they're fun. They're good filler material if you need to do like a little quick delve of some kind, but it doesn't necessarily bring out the depth of the system by doing something that's that short. And I think that's 5th edition is sort of pointed towards, in my opinion, like the shorter, like layer assault style if you're going to do a dungeon crawl, and like the 5-room dungeon trend that I think really came about in the 5e era. And I don't think that translates super cleanly to any kind of OSR game. Me personally, that's what I think.
I think you're probably right about that. I mean, it's true that the layer assaults were also around at 4e, and there was sort of the idea of the 4 encounter adventuring day in 3e. But if you go back to 2nd edition D&D or anything in OSR, I don't think that you have that few encounters most of the time. We would just kind of keep going when we were playing back in the day.
Yeah, there
So-
wasn't this planned amount of encounters per day. And it was about like, how far do you want to push your luck? That was the
Mhm.
actual metric.
Yeah, but
So we had a few super chats. Also,
okay.
I figured out that Arc is the name of the RPG that I was talking about before that I couldn't remember what it was called. So Dire Den said, "Lifetime GM, so grateful for ShadowDark. It got one of my players to GM. I finally get to play. Slayed at the Scarlet Minotaur last night. Thanks, Kelsey."
That makes me so happy to hear. Good job on you all for beating the Minotaur, and congrats to that player for becoming a GM. That's so exciting.
I hope they beat the Minotaur. They might have all died to the Minotaur.
It can go either way,
But I think that lifetime GM would be happy to play even if they died to the Minotaur.
Yeah.
And then Lord Gwydion said, "How did ShadowDark Independent Game Jam come about? Amazing amount of content."
Thank you. That's Alan. Hi, Alan. I know you. The game jam, I was talking to Baron Durop about how I was really impressed by the amount of really cool material coming out. And I was like, gosh, I hope people still want to write for the game, in a few months from now. And he was like, I think people want to write for the game, Kelsey. Let's do a game jam and see. And the response was just absolutely astonishing. And so it I'm happy to say that it looks like people are excited to make content for it. And Ryan Baron Durop putting that jam together really proved that to me more definitively than anything I've seen. So thanks everyone who participated.
Awesome. So I think I see one more question that wasn't in the super chat that said, do you have any advice on writing a gauntlet?
Running a gauntlet. Yes. A gauntlet is the ShadowDark version of a funnel because it's different enough mechanically, and also I just don't like the name funnel. I don't think it accurately describes the experience personally. So running a gauntlet is where you're running 0 level characters that are very weak and fragile, and kind of determining who's going to be your character amongst the survivors. So my advice is, first of all, I would run a low-level dungeon that has a really healthy mix of combats and things that are like environmental challenges and, NPC interactions, because anything that harms a character is going to kill them. So if you make a death trap, or you run a death trap style dungeon, or even sort of an ordinary first level dungeon, it's going to probably be a little bit lopsided towards mayhem. So good blend of different things, and give the characters lots of opportunities to avoid combat and death, because the point of a gauntlet is to try to teach people to play smart and to avoid combats and dangers if they can. And I would the only other thing to bear in mind is when you're running a gauntlet, it helps to sort of spoon feed characters equipment and things during it, like finding caches of treasure or armor or swords, because they come in with almost no good equipment, and part of the effort is to acquire better equipment, like armor that can protect you from being killed instantly, or a sword that lets you deal good damage. So having those peppered throughout is really important, and then making sure not to accidentally put in barriers to progress that would require class abilities, like the ability to lockpick a door. Well, nobody's a thief yet, so nobody can lockpick the door. Like, at best, someone could try to kick it down. So making sure you don't accidentally put class-based challenges in there that couldn't be overcome by classless characters is something you have to bear in mind.
Yeah, I think I like the name Gauntlet for it better than Funnel or like Grinder or something like that too, because Gauntlet feels more like it is sort of, it definitely sounds like it's deadly and it's going to kill lots of people because it's a gauntlet, but it feels like it's sort of aspirational towards a challenge rather than being defined by the fact that it's murdering characters and turning them into chaff that will just get killed, like a Funnel or a Meat Grinder or other names like that. Just kind of sound like this is a device intended to murder lots of people and only to win out.
Yeah, it's funny. I think someone on the internet was unhappy with me for naming the ShadowDark version of Gauntlet, and I was like, wait till you see what else I renamed in this game. It's not the only thing that got changed, but if I ever changed a name on something, it was because I felt it was more descriptive, and possibly because that element needed to be differentiated from other versions of it that exist in other games. Because in a Gauntlet, you're running 1 0-level character at a time, and I think in what would be considered a funnel, I don't even know who originated the idea of a funnel. It predates Dungeon Crawl Classics. You'd be running like multiple PCs at a time per player, and
that's first edition.
Yeah,
because
was it even?
Yeah, it's first edition because if you look at the if you look at the back of Tomb of Horrors, there's actually pre-gens in it, and in the pre-gens, it's like here's your 20. And there's like 3 parties of pre-gens, and it's like, here's your 3 different parties. One had like 20 characters, and one had like 19 characters, and one had 18 characters. So you were expected to run, and they're all different levels. Like, you're expected to run like 20 characters at once. through the Tomb
Yeah.
of Horrors. Not one character, not what we do now, which is 4 characters each. And then like the D&D 1.0 days.
But when did they first call it a funnel?
Oh, that I don't know when they called it a funnel.
I remember seeing that in those when I was playing back in those days, but
Yeah.
I don't remember it being called a funnel back in those
that
days.
I never heard until DCC.
I think it was a colloquialism until DCC turned it into terminology for their specific way of doing a funnel.
Mhm.
So that's and with like tournament modules, those were kind of their own version of a funnel. Like maybe the characters weren't so fragile, they're not going to die in one hit, but still you were expected to plow through characters.
You know what? I designed the characters for the tournament modules.
What?
Yes.
That's so cool. I gotta hear more about that.
Yeah.
How did you decide? What did you have parameters that you had to meet about this character has these spells? And
yeah, so this is what happened. So Adrian Palmer ran the DCC, and I'm gonna humble brag here, but I was like, and this is like way back in the mid 2000s, and I wanted to go to Gen Con, but I didn't really know anyone or anything, and they were looking for new judges. And you had to know 3.5. So he was like, there was a test you had to take. And I took the test, and he wrote me back and he said, you got the highest score anyone's ever had on the test. And I was like, oh, really? Okay. I guess I know 3.5 pretty well. But I was running Age of Worms back then. So, and my players are like, half of them are lawyers. So yeah. And we used to get into like actual fist fights because we were young and stupid back then. So you really had to know the rules, like, because people were screaming at each other because,
Oh, no.
It's actually the same group I play with today. And today we're like, whatever.
They've calmed down now, though, right? I remember you said that.
We talk about it. I was like, remember those days when we used to like get into actual fist fights, and now we're like, yeah, whatever, it's fine.
Well, I do have good news for you, Stephen. I know you said you were humble bragging, but I don't think you were.
Okay.
I think that was like a regular brag.
Okay.
Because there wasn't anything humble about saying that you got the highest score.
Well, I'm just telling you what he said. And then he invited me to be a judge, and he lived in New Jersey. And I lived in New York, so he actually ended up joining my game for a while. And then what ended up happening is then I ran it for 1 year, and then we had my group. We would get the module early, and we would play test it, and we would actually run it. And he asked me to do the characters, so I literally named the characters and made them. And what I would do is I would always make them a little broken. In fact, there are some in here I can tell you even with their names. So I would make them inefficient. So, and that was on purpose. So you'd make them as difficult to run as possible. But for the DCC, you'd get them early. So here we are. Like, here, Mark, does this sound like Mark knows how I write and the names I use?
That's
Are you
true.
ready?
It's always going to be a simple word that
Blood
uses regular...
song! Blood song of the dark!
It uses regular English words like blood song.
Yes!
It's exactly what I was starting to say.
That's the rogue.
Before you said it.
And we have Norris Backbreaker, which is actually a take on the most infamous NPC we ever had, or follower, which was Norris Neverhit. We have Clapperoff, which Bob Marquis, he was at the dinner table at your first birthday, Kelsey. Bob was at the end. Every character he plays in every game is named Clapperoff. That is Bob's character right there. Every game, doesn't matter. I had Kizzy Zendra, because I like Z's, so I just put that in. I have Rojan Redjack, which is my friend Chris Beamer. That's his character. I have Tordic Esrun, which is Dr. Nurse, spelled backwards, because I'm that type of person. And
a lot of these are
the healer.
characters from your group,
yes,
right? Tordok,
yes.
Tordok was
also
a PC
Bob's character
in your group.
Yes.
And you told me you didn't even realize it was
I didn't realize
doctor
it
with the syllables switched until he told you.
Because what happened, I needed a last name, so I wrote Bob. I said, Bob, what's Tordak's last name? And he goes, Esram. And he goes, you know what that means? I go, no. He goes, Doctor Nurse, backwards. And I go, oh. After he was using, after he was playing Doctor for the Tordok for 3 years, I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. So
so funny. That's that you have to keep an eye out, because every so often there is a backwards spelling of something in it, especially old school D&D stuff, and it's someone's name. So
yeah, well, we have
I know we have a biased group of viewers who came here to hear us and hear about ShadowDark, but our viewers seem to agree the Gauntlet is a better name. See, I thought that some people would watch and be like my hot take of just being like, I don't like the funnel name. They'd be like, Mark is wrong. But so far we're doing okay on that.
Sorry we're geeking
Thanks,
out.
you all.
Sorry we're geeking out. Don't worry. Kelsey will be on again, I'm sure.
I would love to.
So yeah, I mean that's what half
Can't
the
get rid of
show
me
is
now.
interviews and half it is geeking out about our own experiences because
Mhm.
you know we've been doing this. You know, Mark freaking worked for Paizo forever. You know, it's like then now you're like super popular and famous and everyone loves your game and I'm like, you know, on the sidelines somewhere but trying to inch my way
What?
in.
No way.
You're the one who brings the business perspective, Steven.
That's true.
Every time we
That's
have
true.
to talk about a topic that involves business and what a big company is going to do, you're
That's
the only
true.
one.
I know,
who
I'm the
knows
only one.
exactly what they're going to do.
It's
Mhm.
true.
You've had some reassuring advice for me on
Oh.
industry combos because we spent a lot of time at Gen Con together and
We did.
we basically talked like this for 2 days straight. And so
Mhm.
it's just I feel like every time we have a conversation, I either learn something really interesting about game history or the third-party companies that I really like, or I get some like nugget of industry advice that I don't know how I would have learned otherwise. So it's really fun. It's fun to talk to you about
And
it.
ShadowDark, that's the perfect, you know what that's called? That's called the dwarf name, as I found out. Because when I said to my writers, I want easy names like Never Hit and Dark Sun and he's like, oh, dwarf names. I'm like, dwarf names? He goes, yeah, Battle Axe, like those are dwarven names. So
It's so Iron Helm. Yeah,
Iron Helm. So I was like,
Sometimes their
heard that.
halfling last names often have those two, like Good Barrel or like those kind of things.
So
But theirs are
ShadowDark.
cheerful.
ShadowDark is a dwarf name.
It is. You know, it makes sense. It's all there's a lot of underground going on in it, so it makes sense. But
Well, I'm a big believer in using very simple to spell, say, memory. There's a lot of marketing for that. In fact, my favorite line in there was that movie about Nike that came out. What was it called? Air, and they're talking to Phil Knight, and he says, "Oh, you know, why'd you call it Nike?" He goes, the marketing company we hired said to come up with a 4-letter name that was easy to remember, so we called it Nike." and
there you go. It's true.
And that's true. I'm like, yep, that's exactly right. That's why we have like Battle Zoo, Roll for Combat, ShadowDark. Like you want simple, easy, remember names that are also unique enough that you can get the URL.
Do you know how hard it was? You guys must have stories about this too. Coming up with the name of the game was like a year-long saga. I changed the working title of the game's like name. I mean, maybe 7 times before I finally settled on something that fit the vibe and like I could get the URL for and all that. It's so funny. Some of the stuff, like its working title when it was a super early draft 4 or 5 years ago was Wizards and Thieves.
Oh, that's not bad.
Because I was like, I want Wizards and Thieves in it. And then there's a jokey thing in the book. I made a
No, it's what?
Yeah, what? Yeah, I know.
What are you
Magic
playing?
users and
What?
thieves.
What? Like Abbott and
You're
Costello.
like, what? I know it's yes, that would have been a problem. So I'm glad I didn't keep that. And I made a mini game in ShadowDark called Wizards and Thieves as a super deep Easter egg joke about its original working title.
That's cool. Yeah, we I had Battle Zoo for like 30 years. I've had that URL and then a company name, so I just kept it forever until I could use it. So, and that's
very smart.
And that's the line. Everyone liked that name, and everyone's like, "Oh, what is that?" I'm like, it's easy to say and remember, and people think it's cool, and it works in a lot of various ways. So, and that's the line of products. It's just Battle Zoo, so everything's under the Battle Zoo line. But so for you. So with ShadowDark, like, what was your impetus? Like, you know, it's like you just like wake up one day, you're like, I'm gonna write a new game. I mean, this has got to be like, how did this even come to be? Like, what prompted you to make your own? I mean, were you playing something and you didn't like it, or like, where did this come from?
Yeah, like I think it was kind of a lot of small things that built up. I had been writing and self-publishing 5th edition material for many years. And, you know, as I got deeper down the rabbit hole on that, I started to feel a little bit like I wasn't able to write the things that reminded me of the way I played D&D as a kid for 5th edition. Like like the system was fighting against me for that. And so I started to be like, gosh, I wonder if I can just tinker with the core rules of 5e to try to pull in a little bit more of an emphasis on the style of play that I wanted to represent. And you can only hack something so much before it's unrecognizable. And so then I started looking to other systems that other people had written that might meet that goal. And while there was a lot I appreciated about a variety of them, I was like, this doesn't land quite right for me. And then I was like, there was a moment where I was like, oh my God, I'm about to write a game, aren't I? And I was like, no, this is the worst idea. Like, I'm a 5th edition publisher. Why am I doing this? And I kind of couldn't stop myself. It turned into this passion project where I was so excited to kind of create this, I guess, playground where I could write it to support the style of adventure design that I wanted. And so it started to happen from there. And I was playing in a game of Index Card RPG, which is a fantastic game and probably one of my biggest influences for ShadowDark. This is by Runehammer Games. I was playing in a game with the creator of that game and some of our friends, and we were kind of testing its limits with how it could handle like dungeon crawling and dungeon style crawling. And I think that's when I was suddenly like, wait a minute, I sort of see this game coming to life in my head that is addressing all of the different things we're trying to solve here. And so that's where it started to come out of it. It came out of us trying to delve into Barrow Maze and learning some things about how Index Card RPG was handling that effort. So yeah, that's where it came from.
But are you big into what's happening in the video game space right now, especially with Elden Ring, it's like people were really into, like really hard video games and like, deadly encounters and things that are really tough and grinding out. And, it's the whole history of Elden Ring and Dark Souls was like, oh, this was like sort of a niche game, but it kept getting more and more popular. And now people, love it, and they love the difficulty and they love how hard it is. And it seems like OSR is going through that renaissance too. It's like, I don't know if people are just, playing 5e or other games and it's too easy and they want real challenge and they want to feel like there's a real threat of death and that it's really tough. And it's not like, when I play 5e, I feel like I'm a superhero every time. It's just like, it's like, oh, I'm going to kill him. No, I'm going to kill him. Like, it's like, it feels I never feel threatened when I play 5e. I feel like it's just how quickly can you destroy the bad guy. But then you play these, DCC OSR games, or like when we played Mothership, it's like, we all died, everyone died. It's like
you died the coolest way, but
I did die the coolest way. But like you're going to die or pretty close, and like, what do you think the reason is that, especially for you, like you put this thing out and it exploded. Even I was like, oh my God, where'd this come from? It's like, it just came out of almost not nowhere, but like really exploded, exploded.
It did. I was not prepared, but I think that there is sort of a desire for games to reflect maybe the more humble origin story, and there's a certain amount of pride that you take in piloting an imperfect character up to greater heights, and it's sort of like if you can sit down with a group of your friends and say like, I have a 5th level dwarf fighter with a 9 constitution and I somehow have made it to this point, you have just an immense amount of investment in that character and pride in being able to play well enough to keep that character alive. And I wasn't feeling that angle of the player experience with 5e, and I thought it was really missing. I remember a lot of times as a kid getting totally obliterated in a dungeon because of our own bad choices, and then we would work up over the weeks playing every weekend, and someone would finally have their 3rd level fighter, and like that person would be the hero of the group because he could like chop down more orcs than us and we would all hide behind him, and he had actually achieved something by becoming a 3rd level fighter. And I wanted to bring that sense of pride in achievement back, because it's not guaranteed at all in ShadowDark. You really have to play smart and be a little lucky sometimes to get to those higher levels.
So how deadly is ShadowDark once you get out of the grinder? Like, how likely is it, in your experience, that one of the characters just dies? I just looked at it briefly. I see there's a death timer, so you have 1d4 plus con modifier number of rounds, and given you're rolling 3d6, that con modifier could be 0 or lower pretty easily.
Yeah. On average, people get
if it's
a
a
2.
minus, does that subtract from the d4, or is it minimum 1d4?
It subtracts down a minimum of 1. So
okay. So it's minimum 1 at least.
Yeah. So you always get a full round, which means you go down, you roll on your turn. So like if you go right after the GM, you're not going to die, but you always get at least one full round of your allies trying to help you. And there are ways people can help you. Priests can cast healing spells. Anybody can make an attempt to stabilize you. So the game is definitely, I would say, less deadly than like basic expert where you just die at 0. You do have a chance. You have a pretty solid chance. Now, it is, I would safely call it more deadly than 5th edition.
Well, a lot of games are
more deadly than 5th edition. I think walking my dog is more deadly than 5th edition. I mean,
you can adjust 5th edition to be harder, but I guess at the baseline difficulty from what I've seen and heard from lots and lots of GMs is that the player characters are strong enough in 5th edition that saying more deadly than 5th edition would be like, I guess, deciding between several different wars, which was the most deadly, and being like, well, this one was more deadly than
it's
playing
more
paintball. Like this one's more deadly than playing paintball was, right?
It's not that deadly. Everyone says the same thing. It's like the first 5 levels are super deadly, and then after that, it's a cakewalk.
Right. Yeah, I feel like that's true with 5th edition. 5th edition, in my opinion, is most enjoyable, like in the 1 to 5 level range, and then it kind of gets a little crazy. And
I mean, it's fun to play that. Trust me, when I play it once in a while, it is fun to just go in and mop the floor with the monsters. But what you were saying, it's fascinating because that guy Adrian Palmer I was telling you about, we played Carrying Crown, which was an adventure path, a horror adventure path. And he had a dwarf, and he had this is 1st edition Pathfinder, he had a dwarf with a weapon that was part of his ancestry, and he never improved it because it was his weapon. It was family heirloom. And it definitely made him a little weaker. But as you said, of like him being so proud that he was able to make it all the way to the end of like 17th, 18th level using one weapon and never got a plus anything on it. And and it's like, and after that, now our current game, not only did our characters not take the bonus archetype mark for Pathfinder 2nd, but half of them took flaws.
Yeah, you told me.
Yeah, and actually nerfed their characters to make them worse on purpose because it's more fun. Like almost like, wow, they've gone 360. They used to totally power game, and now they're literally making their characters optimized on purpose. And there you go. It's fun. I mean, they're definitely. It's almost, it's like playing Dark Souls. It's like they really want to make it hard. And when they win, let me tell you, they get some pretty damn close scrapes. But, when they win, it feels like true victory.
If you have players who want to make it hard, you can make almost any edition hard.
That's true.
It's not. The problem is when like someone who's just earnestly trying to build a character, not trying to do anything exploitative, just be like, oh, this looks cool and powerful, I guess I'll take it. It's one of the regular things that's in the game. It's probably fine, right? Then it's not fine, and then they just win the game.
Keep in mind, could be an issue. And you know this very well, is that if you need everyone to do it, because if you have one character who's nerfed and 3 that are good, it can hurt the party, it can hurt the play experience. They all had to do it, and they all did. So they're all non-optimized characters, and it definitely it evens itself out, which is why I think people like ShadowDark and OSR and all these type of games, because it's automatically like that. Like everyone's in the same playing field. No one has a super powerful.
You don't
character.
have to optionally do it.
Exactly.
So some people in chat were trying to answer my question. Perspective Detective said that they had their first TPK playing ShadowDark ever. They started running like AD&D 2nd edition back in the 90s. So I mean, that's a good answer to my question of how deadly is it compared to other deadly RPGs. And then a super chatter, Mr. Blawface, asked me, in your opinion, Mark, how deadly would Pathfinder 2nd edition be? So like, I guess as one of the co-creators, I think that Pathfinder 2nd Edition's deadliness depends on how you're going to rate it, okay? Because in Pathfinder 1st Edition, if you're rating, like, the players are min-maxing to the top degree of what Pathfinder 1st Edition can be, and you were just, like, running something out of the book, an out-of-the-book encounter that one of your characters can win on their first turn. Like, obviously that could be very easy, but it's also very easy to build characters that just get wiped at high levels in Pathfinder First if you don't know what to do. And if the GM is also optimizing to try to present something that's like a roughly good challenge to their group, then it's incredibly deadly. So I ran Pathfinder First Edition, and I did it in that third thing that I just said, where I made a good challenge for my group. They always made it through to the end. They never TPK'd, actually, in like my Rise of the Runelords game. But we had like almost 20 permanent character deaths, and it numbered in the hundreds if you count the times that they died and were brought back by the Breath of Life spell that can bring someone back to life within one round if they die. And that's just because the death and dying system in Pathfinder First Edition was such that basically you had a few hit points after you zero before you died, but by high levels, when you're hit for 102 of your 250 hit points, the chances that you land between 0 and 14 or something like that, negative 14 was like nothing. So you would basically, if you got challenged at all, somebody would probably die in higher level encounters. So compared to that, I would say Pathfinder 2nd Edition is less deadly by far. In my same group, ran a Pathfinder 2nd Edition version of the War for the Crown adventure path, and we had 0 deaths. It was, in fact, the first adventure path I ran from level 1 through to the end with no character deaths in it. And so, however, I recognize that online people generally consider Pathfinder 2 to be more challenging. And I think it is. And that's because I was able to run against like the actual difficulty that the game book said would be difficult. Whereas the things I was doing in Pathfinder First Edition were like 7 or 8 levels at least higher than they were supposed to be in order to get like the correct level of challenge for my PCs, or the same level, but I really optimized the enemies.
That was a long answer.
But a good answer. It addresses the, I mean, Pathfinder had the First Edition and Second Edition both have an enormous amount of of a moving target of difficulty based on the skill of the DM, and most certainly the players. Like, that's one really cool thing about its deeper complexity than, a more simple game. So player skill and game master skill are really, especially at higher levels, starting to come strongly into play with those games.
Yeah, I think they do in other games too. The guy who had the first TPK ever in ShadowDark said it was sort of a player skill issue because they forgot about the light timer and it ran out in the middle of a fight. That was already a little dicey.
Sorry, but that delights me. That's what
they just forgot that it existed, and that they were just. I think they'll never forget again. That group.
Right. And then, like, once you start having creatures attacking the light source, then it starts to become its own new sub game of how do we keep the light going. So,
So we'll take a super quick break. Do check out the Kickstarter. It ends today.
In like 7 hours.
Yeah, a Kickstarter. And there's a lot of cool stuff. It ends today.
Ooh, we need only a little over $2,000 to hit that next stretch goal. We've got 7 hours. So that's going to be interesting to see if we hit
it's
it or not.
It's a new archetype written by Mark. And when we come back, because I know people like to leave during a quick break, but Kelsey's going to tell how she's the superest of geeks because she met Gary Gygax at Gen Con. She's going to tell us the story.
I will.
Hi, Barbarian here. Are you a game master looking for an amazing game world rich in lore and strange new creatures to run your D&D or Pathfinder 2 game in? Well, look no further than the world of Battlezoo, Indigo Isles. The world of Battlezoo, Indigo Isles contains everything you need to set sail for adventure. Except maybe a boat. You're probably gonna have to buy your own boat. But the book itself contains a detailed overview of key locations on the Indigo Isles, dozens of story hooks and NPCs, and details on the ancient spiritual religion known as the Eld. Wow, that sounds spooky. Don't forget to take your weapons with you. You'll also get 15 new dragons as monsters, featuring the entire family of wild dragons from the Battlezoo Ancestry's Dragons book to help you murderize your players' precious characters. And you'll get gobs of new magic items to make them feel like they might have a chance. But they won't, will they? What's more, there are tons of new character options, 10 new ancestries, 10, and new archetypes and subclasses and heritages, and seven familiars native to the Indigo Isles. Remember, the world of Battlezoo Indigo Isles comes in 2 versions, one for D&D 5e and another for Pathfinder 2. Oh yeah, and they're releasing the PDF right after the Kickstarter ends. If you'd like a new fantastical world to amaze your players with, click the link below and back the Kickstarter today.
But
Whoops.
nothing made me.
we were on too long. I was too interested in trying to figure out how to open up this battery case. I found finally someone who shows me how to do it, but it's the problem with these Japanese models. They're so well built that it's impossible to find the seams. They're like the level of perfection of craftsmanship is so good. I can't find where
This
the
is
battery.
like the framing story of our episode is Steven's adventures with
The
this
ship.
battleship, right?
I
It just
know.
has to come back to it each
When you
time. It's like
because
the
it's
B
so
plot.
because
the
if I
B
get it to
plot.
work, it'll be worth it. Trust me. You'll be like, oh my god, this thing is amazing. Well, while I fool around with this, Kelsey is the coolest geek ever. Do you mind if I call you a geek?
I don't mind.
Okay. She grew up in the same town as Gary Gygax and met him.
Close enough.
Close.
I wasn't there, but I was pretty much there.
So tell us about your story, because this was the first time you've been to Gen Con since when was it? Like, how long ago was it since you went to Gen Con?
Since I was in high school, so
Wow.
more than 25 years ago.
Oh my god.
Yeah. So last time I went, I was in high school, and I mean, Gen Con, I had gone when it was in Indianapolis, like maybe twice, but it was held in Milwaukee in Wisconsin
Right.
for many, many years prior to that. And I lived in southern Wisconsin, so in a small farm town. And we went to Gen Con. My posse of friends and we had like a little group of gamers that got together every weekend at the local game store to play D&D. And that game was being run by a really lovely gentleman named James Mishler, he worked in game design. He was an editor at Scry magazine, if you guys remember back in the day. And he was playing in Gary Gygax's weekly games on Thursdays. So he'd go there every night to Gary's house and play in the game. And then he'd come back home and he'd run his games in the city state of the Invincible Overlord for us on Saturdays. So pack of kids.
So first coolness, her GM was in Gary Gygax's game. DM,
Yeah,
sorry. That's the first.
GM,
That's the first level of coolness. Okay.
which is majestic.
Which is so. What's the next level of coolness?
So I didn't know that until much later, because at the time it didn't seem super. It seemed special, but I guess nobody knew that Gary wasn't going to be with us for a lot longer, and so So that game master, that our dungeon master,
Mhm.
who has also had a company with like Bob Bledsaw, who's the founder of Judges Guild. He was like writing material with Bob for Judges Guild and all that. And he met us all at Gen Con in Milwaukee, which falls over my birthday. And so I had been kind of getting more and more in my mind that I wanted to start dungeon mastering games. And, I was thinking like, yeah, it seems really fun. It seems like something I'd really want to do, but I didn't feel like I knew, that I'd be ready. And James went and pulled Gary aside and was like, hey, I have this kid in my weekly group. She loves D&D. It's, the only thing she talks about, and she wants to be a dungeon master. It's her birthday. Would you be willing to like wish her a happy birthday and like, give her a little encouragement? And he said yes. So he took time out of Gen Con, where he was probably, the most busy and wanted person the whole time. Like he couldn't walk 5 feet without getting stopped. And he met with me in my gaming group, like out on this like private smoking patio. And he hung out with us for a little while, and he signed my Dungeon Master's Guide, my 3rd edition Dungeon Master's Guide, which had just come out that year, I think. He signed it. There it is. Happy birthday,
Oh
Kelsey.
my God.
Yeah.
There you go.
Wow.
Because he wanted me, my friends like sneakily got him to do this because he wanted me to be a dungeon master, and
Wow.
he gave me some dice for my birthday. Like, and he was so encouraging. He was like really like excited for me to want to be a DM, and he told me some advice that is a little bit Gary-ish. He said, I quote him when I say this. He said, "Slap your players around like redheaded dwarves." That was the advice he gave me.
And
Which
ShadowDark was born. There we go.
It was, yeah. But the root of that advice was don't go easy on
The
your
root of
players.
advice is, I'm going to take that to heart and make a OSR game where everyone dies. You got it.
There
Thank
you go.
Thanks, Gary.
Thanks, Gary, for reminding me that it is the challenge that matters. No, it's funny. He said that, and he was so nice to us. And I crossed paths with him, I think 1 or 2 more times as a kid, like, cause he came and ran games at that local game store that I went to every week.
Wow.
And I think I caught him in passing. I remember missing it one time and being so upset, but he was around, so I got to play with his players. I got to learn from his players. I got to be told to be mean to my players, and that all worked out.
That's why I can't wait I want to run a game with you. I want to see how mean you are.
I'm not really that
I know,
mean.
that's what I'm saying. Like, you're such a nice person, and everyone has nothing but the best things to say about you. And it's like, oh, Kelsey, she's so nice. She's so everything. And it's like, here, you're all going to die. The shadow is taking over. Your torches are out. You're all dying horrible deaths.
It's all bluster. It's all making people afraid of you, and then letting your reputation carry
It's the
you.
kayfabe.
Yeah, yes, it is.
But some people have that dichotomy of stuff, Steven. I think Linda is very much in the same mold, where she loves like the Eldamon plushies and cute stuff, but then she'll just also put in like creepy things, and then things that will just absolutely kill you. And she was known in our like local region when we were doing a lot of society as being someone who was like very deadly as well.
Oh, Dungeon Damsel's in. I've actually been watching Dungeon Damsel, and she has a new Kickstarter starting next week for ShadowDark.
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
I'm on top of the news, man. I'm always on top of it. Read everything. I know. I read a lot. That's what we were saying. We read fast because we got to read a lot of stuff every day. So Mark and I like slam through stuff quick.
Yeah, Mark read the entire ShadowDark book like on that
during this interview.
Yeah.
Not during the 1.5 minute break.
I know.
It did take like 10-20 minutes before the show, and then this whole hour of the show. I did not read all the monsters and the items. I read a few of each, and for the encounter tables, I read one representative encounter table and then assumed that the other ones were similar.
They are.
So that helped. Like, there's a lot of pages that means that I skipped, but it looks really cool.
Who's Dungeon Damsel? She looks like she's like a super fan of yours, or is she looks like one of your I don't know, main developers now, from what I can tell.
She's working on she's co-creating a project called A Natural Selection, which is like a big supplemental rules set. There's like classes and spells and all kinds of stuff for the ShadowDark game. So it's like it's a notable release that has a ton of stuff in it for the game. And so they've been active in the Discord, Facebook, playtesting stuff. So definitely a known name amongst the ShadowDark people.
So what is it that you included? Because I'm looking at your ShadowDark. Hold on, bringing up the PDF. So I got obviously the rules, and we have the pre-made characters and first level characters. What are these digital zines? What were those exactly? Because I'm just curious to the history of these.
Those are each like micro settings. So they're like 64-page zines that have a theme to them. So they have a hex crawl of a certain region. And then they have character classes that are particular to the style of the region. Like the first one is a spooky forest. And so it has spooky witches and fairy type and like knights, like dark knights and green knights and stuff. And then new monsters and an adventure set in that thing. So like each one is kind of a contained micro setting. And there are 3 of them. So one's for a kind of a desert setting, and then one's for sort of a Nordic Viking style setting.
And then you have your dungeons, literally 2-page dungeons. Like I saw that, I was like, 2-page dungeons. 2-page dungeons.
They're tiny. They're mini dungeons.
I don't even know if I could write something that small if I tried. I'm like, Mark, can I do that? I don't think it's possible.
2-page dungeon is possible, like Orc
not
and
for
Pie
me.
exists.
There you go. You could totally.
Steven always makes things longer. So that is like the meme, and it's completely true. Like I know that like Linda, who wrote the final part of Jewel of the Indigo Isles adventure path, was like kind of flabbergasted by the amount of additional ideas for expansions that Steven had for her to expand the adventure, and it became like twice as long
as the
initial outline for the third part by the time it was done.
Well, because I only gave her like 16 pages of notes.
Yeah, but you also asked for entire large sections to be added, and so it's part of what makes it such a gigantic and deluxe adventure path as a whole, is that particular part of it just expanded and expanded. So Steven is known for this. I think that Steven would find a way to make Orc and Pie a 2-pager, and that's how he could do a 2-pager.
They'd make what a 2-pager?
Orc and Pie is like Monty Cook created like the
the
smallest possible OGL compliant adventure that anybody could write, that had all of the things that an OGL adventure would normally need to include or would typically include in the standard format that was used back in 3rd edition. And it was like this tiny like little box of information.
Yeah, and like the orc is guarding a pie, you have to get the pie.
Right, I do remember that.
It's like expanded the adventure. Where do the orcs get the pie? It had all the sections it's supposed to have.
I love it.
Well, so I'm actually curious about this, because since I started to look more into OSR, and it's okay. So you have the DCCs, their adventures, which are something in between. They're not short, but they're not long. They're not Paizo adventures where you have lots of readout, like, something in between. Then you have some of these adventures that I've seen, like these, that are literally just three, not even paragraphs, 3 sentences describing a room. I mean, literally, it's like it says here, open to the elements, huge iron brazier full of damp and rotting fuel. That's it. That's the description for the room. I find, at least for the Pathfinder people and adventures, we are the D&D 5e type, where there's a lot of information, like a lot of details, and we put it all in there, not because you have to use it, but I think it helps because also we're telling a story. Like I think it's apples and oranges. I think it's like apples and not even pineapples, apples and spaceships. Like it's very different, because ours and adventure paths, the good ones tell a story that lasts for 20 levels. So you
Right.
really need details to connect it all together. Otherwise, it starts to feel very disconnected, very off the rails. People are out of the adventure, as opposed to these where it's more the DM is trying to come up with the atmosphere and what's happening. Like even when we played our game, what was it again?
We were playing Mothership. I think.
Mothership.
Yeah.
Like that was like all over the place. Like he was just making up crap left and right, because
Yeah.
we were all over the place on that game, and that's fine. But I feel like there seems to be two schools. It's just like the bare minimum, just like here's what's in the room, here's the monster, figure it out, and you just tell a story. Or here's everything you need to know. Like literally we are having there's discussions on our Discord about skeletons in one part of the adventure and why are they there, and they're trying to figure out the history of the 200 years of like what caused skeletons to be in this one location. And I'm like, oh my god. I'm like
And Steven thinks about those kind of things. That's why he gives 16 pages of notes.
Right.
There you go.
Right, but I'm angry because I missed that. I'm like, oh, you're right. But that's why I had to figure out I had the retcon. Now I'm doing retcons. I'm like, because they're like, well, those skeletons shouldn't be there. And I was like, yes, but how do you know they're from the current crew of bad guys? Because they're skeletons from what you think is the current crew of bad guys. I'm like, they could be from past crews and they just wandered over there. Well, how do you know?
It's just that the name of the stat block
I
was
know, I
skeletal
missed
that
it.
true. And that's not a mistake. It's just the first time it appears, it's a skeleton
I
from
know.
a new pirate crew.
Yeah.
But really, it's the stats of any skeleton that's a parrot person.
I know.
So
I know.
it's used
Bothered
later in the
me.
adventure for skeletal parrot people as a whole, whether or not they're from that crew.
I know, but I missed
I don't think it's a
something.
problem. But I think you're right, Stephen, that it's not just in terms of those adventures, but it's sort of people like to divide out player types and RPG types among several different kinds of RPGs. And you could maybe try to do a trichotomy where you have rules heavy and very detailed with lots of things that are going on. Then you can have the narrative is very fluffy and it's like you describe a thing and then roll to see what happens in the narrative. And then I would say that like a lot with OSR, it's kind of a third thing where it's like it's definitely rulesy, but it's not in a rules heavy, everything is described, here's this gigantic matrix of all that you have, but it's more a lot of the words and the mechanisms go into allowing for like random generation with big tables and sort of things that appear organically during play, whereas like some of the other big mechanistic games like Pathfinder 2nd edition or 5th edition are more of a like you figure out what you're going to put together in advance. So it's kind of like they're cousins, not siblings, but they're similar in some ways.
I absolutely agree. I think that the approach is like when you're writing a campaign path that has to stretch over 20 levels and you're working on incorporating story, there are a lot more layers that need to go all the way out through the 20th level. And one thing they say about OSR games is that there is no backstory. The backstory of your campaign world is levels 1 through 3 of your characters. And so you have a lot of site-based adventures that have implied world to them, but then you are kind of seeing where the characters go and then using generation methods and sort of following the spotlight of the characters and expanding the world around them as they go in a much, I guess you could call it agile or even like hands-off. And I would call it emergent way. So most characters aren't going to make it to 3rd level, or if they do, they're very fortunate. And so once you're hitting that spot is when you start to have story organically emerge from what they're doing. And I think that's just a different mentality. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a better way to do it, but I think that the focus of old school games tends to have that as a baseline assumption.
So let me ask you a question, because I didn't try OSR, but I did try a dungeon crawl, a tradition with the what's the Pathfinder 1st edition dungeon crawl, Mark, that came out, the
what?
The first, the
But
was
did
the
Paizo do it?
yeah, the Paizo one, the Dungeon Crawl, the first edition.
There are a lot of
Emerald.
Emerald Spire.
Emerald
So
Spire.
there was just too many things for me to possibly guess what you were
Well,
talking
that
about.
was the most. Well, that was a dungeon crawl. Like that literally was a pure dungeon crawl. Like, the point of that is that we tried it and we only got about halfway through because to us there was no story. Like, and I tried to add one, but it just was like, it was just very samey for us. And I guess maybe just because we've been playing for so long. I mean, I've been playing since the 70s, so like, fighting is not enough. Like, we need more than just fighting. And even the few times, the few times I've done DCC or OSR type games, I don't mind them a few times, but I can't seem to get into them that much because it seems like it's just like lots of individual stories that are sort of connected, maybe, for me at least, in my group, as opposed to, that's why we like these very complex, very intricate, long, detailed adventure paths where there's a tremendous story tying it together. And I'm just wondering, how do you feel like when you're playing or DMing? Like, do you need to make up a story that connects these individual, adventures, especially if you have characters that are actually leveling up to like 2 or 3? Like, how do you run your games?
Yeah, sometimes it can feel a little scary when you're game mastering an old school game because you don't have a storyline yet, like you kind of have to wait for one to emerge that is the result of the trouble that the characters get themselves into. So it can be different depending on each time you run it. But I agree that just having like a mega dungeon and having that be the focal point of a campaign and just going back in is not really satisfying because it's kind of missing the larger purpose. And so it's funny, but I find that a storyline emerges most often, not when the characters are in the dungeon, but when they go back to town. So they're getting themselves in trouble. They're making allies. They're buying stuff. They're deciding where they want to go again. They might be having patrons starting to sponsor them or ask them to do things for them. And depending on what threads they pull, you kind of do have to almost improvise it out into a larger campaign with a greater purpose. Like my last group that I was running, they were in a dungeon for a while, and then they went back to town, and then they realized that there was an illegal drug that one could buy in this town, and they realized it was a source of a lot of money. And the motivating factor in old school games is wealth accumulation. That's what causes character advancement. So that's a natural pull. And then they're like, what if we found the source of these illicit goods and then went into the forest and started harvesting it ourselves? And then turned into the campaign, was them going out and trying to like elbow their rivals aside and like get to the sources of these goods first, and then deal with people trying to steal it from them, and then deal with the trouble that came up in the forest as they were encountering other beings. So that was an example of I would never have predicted that the character's final goal was to become drug lords, but that's what they wanted to do, and that's what the campaign became. And so that's, we still have that campaign on pause. We're going to pick it back up hopefully soon because I had to go into Kickstarter mode and we had to kind of end early. But it's funny how things went that way. They wanted to become the bosses of the town, the underlords of the town. So
what is the probability that any given campaign will end with the PCs becoming drug lords? I just don't know.
I think there's a higher than normal ratio for
when I was in high school, I was a forever GM, but then one time one of my players ran something and it was like, it's very weird, and the other players just decided that they wanted to become drug lords. And so like we just had a very wacky and problematic crew of characters that, like, we had a paladin who talked to a sock puppet and just never actually tried to enforce law or good in any conceivable way. He was just talking to the sock puppet. And like a gnome druid who wanted to like murder anyone who was in the logging industry. And a bard who like sang bardic music for the enemies sometimes just for fun.
Nice.
Like we just had these people. We had a human fighter who would like go after the druid and the bard for doing stuff like that. It was like lawful, neutral, merciless, and would just like put these like Hammurabi's code punishments onto the other characters, and then my neutral good character who was like, what are we even doing? Why am I with these people? The GM is like, there's a prophecy. I was like, but they're just drug dealing. Is the prophecy gonna be fulfilled by that? And so they all didn't trust each other and hated each other. My character was the only one who they allowed to run the books, and I was skimming like over 50% of all of their money to use for like drug treatment and to like actually fight our industry, like to just put up people who would like actually stop us from running drugs. Because my character was just like, they thought I wouldn't go against them, I guess, because they knew nobody else was trustworthy, but my character just did not like what we were up to. But
I love
somehow
that.
everyone does drugs. I don't get it.
It just becomes, it's funny how like, because I feel like the group that you just described to me is a very kind of classical OSR style group of characters and players, because there's not always a higher purpose. One could emerge. But sometimes the goal of the campaign is to figure out how to get something that they want that would otherwise be considered totally petty or silly. And the hijinks that ensues trying to get there.
It was very petty and sometimes very mysterious. Like there were people who were starving because of the drug dealers. And at one point I was like, well, we just took their grain caravan. Let's spread it out to the peasants. And the rogue player was like, no, I'm going to burn the grain. So I was like, okay, I can't let you do that. I'm going to have to I'm a wizard. I'm going to have to use like a spell. I guess I'll use like a charm or something and be like, hey, let's not burn the grain. There's a widespread famine and everybody's dying. Let's give it to some people. And the player of the rogue was like to the GM, it's against my nature not to burn the grain. So charm automatically fails.
Oh,
I was like, are you evil? He's like, no.
He might have been. There's always, it's funny, like mixed alignments are not unusual in old school games, like parties having mixed alignments and like different
he was
goals.
Supposedly not.
Yeah, that's so funny. It definitely sounded like entertainingly chaotic, which is how I would describe a lot of OSR style games. Not to say you can't have a higher purpose, but like what is the Against the Giants series for first edition AD&D ultimately was about like destroying Lolth. Like it was about defeating the goddess of the chaotic drow and ending their threat, but it took there's a lot of weird roads to get there, and you can have an end goal maybe, but the characters might never decide to walk toward it.
So we had another question that says, when designing a dungeon, I assume in ShadowDark, what is the average number of rooms per level?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I would say like between 30 and 50. And you would assume just in rough terms that like a third of those might be creatures, which a subset of those then might be combat encounters because you have like reaction and morale systems. And then maybe around a third of those would be environmental puzzles or traps or things to fiddle with. And then another third would be a mixture of empty or unremarkable or something that would be like, you can go in here and explore. There may not be anything. What you're doing is running down the clock and risking random encounters and resources.
All right, so
makes sense.
So what is the future for ShadowDark? Like you're in the middle of fulfilling, and where is it at right now? Because I want my books.
I know, I do too. They're printing right now, so they're all printing. They're gonna get shipped to the warehouse and sent out. And I'm not gonna release any new material for sale until the books are fulfilled. But I'm working on some stuff, and I want to do more zines. I want to do some other supplemental stuff. I'm working on I'm going to do like a little mini solo gameplay show for how to do solo gameplay with ShadowDark, which that was a stretch goal from the Kickstarter. And I didn't really think that it would get there. And then it did. And I was like, oh, I have to make a show about this.
Welcome to my world.
I know. So
that's what always happens. You're like, oh, stretch goal. And then it ends up taking like 500 hours. You're like, oh, God.
You're like, I didn't think this would actually happen. No, it'll be fun. I'm actually really excited about it. I'm having Trevor Duval, who Steven, you met him at Gen Con, I'm pretty sure. But he played in our game. Yes. And he's really a well-known like solo RPG YouTube show creator. And so he's actually coming on my channel next week to kind of talk about all this, and I'm going to ask him questions about how he would recommend we do this kind of thing. So I'm super excited for that. He hopefully will point me in the right direction so I can get this little show put together.
Trevor, he did the voices. Was that Trevor?
He's a voice actor.
Yeah.
His YouTube channel is Me, Myself, and Die.
Yeah, he's going to come on our show too.
He's great. He's so fun.
And so professional voice actor, Mark.
Mhm.
So when we get enough likes, we'll have him do voices. And when he does
There
them,
you go.
they're
That's
the
gonna be
real
much
thing.
better than when you just make whatever.
No,
guest we have
he
do
does
a
them.
voice.
They're real because he gets paid
They're
professionally.
real. Everyone else's voice is not real. And you know, we're
No.
almost at 100 likes. Are you going to force Kelsey to do a voice?
Yeah, sure.
I have two. I have Old Lady and Goblin.
Oh,
That's
good. Okay.
my repertoire.
Okay,
yeah.
we'll do
What
a
about
vote.
Old Lady Goblin?
Wait, or no.
One that's both. Yeah.
Oh, no, we'll do a vote. Okay, start a poll.
Which one?
Oh, wait, it just went up to
Which
100. So now
voice do you
that's what we're going
want?
to have to do.
The old lady's like, "Where are you, young children?
Oh, wait, we're going to do a poll.
Put your swords away and get out of my tavern." You know?
Old lady or goblin?
Well, they already got to hear some of the old
Well,
lady
it's
there
a sneak
already.
preview. There we go.
It
Here
was
we go.
only a sneak preview, and I can only sustain it for like, 2 sentences. So,
We got goblins winning. Goblins winning by a lot right now. Let's see.
Goblin.
No, it's not over yet. We got a long way to go.
Oh, geez.
Yeah,
Yes,
I
this
think
will be the-
Goblin's
Goblin is almost
destroying
unbeatable
them.
at this point, Steve.
You already got old
We've had
lady.
like
Well, that's the problem. They already got the old lady. Like we got a preview.
we've had over a quarter of everyone who's watching it already vote, and among them, 80% voted for Goblin. So I think
It's a win for
I think it's
Goblin.
I think Goblin for the win.
Goblins. They just sound like tiny little angry people. They're like,
Wow, we couldn't even hear you. That was weird.
yeah,
That
it
only-
actually gets canceled
it got
by
distorted.
Zoom because Zoom assumes that your Goblin is like a baby crying or one of
Oh,
those
yeah.
other sounds that gets canceled.
It does sound like a baby crying. It's basically just a screechy baby. So yeah, I bet you could all do Goblin better than me.
Nah,
Just-
Wait, you got to do it again. No one heard it. It was
no,
literally
people, you
canceled
voted
out.
for the wrong one. You voted for
Nobody
the
heard the
noise-
Goblins.
Oh, there we go. Wait, stop talking. Let her
They
talk.
come through.
Yes.
Not a voice actor.
Well,
So set your expectations low, everybody.
that was good enough.
That's good. You know what? When we have the actual voice actor, we'll set our expectations higher.
Well, I made him do. I made him do. What did I make him do? Oh, because he does Emperor Palpatine.
He's
Uh,
Lego Palpatine.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and he does
Uh-huh.
Rocket Raccoon, like on Disney.
He is.
Like he does a
He's the
real show.
animated
So I was like, do it, and he did it, and I'm like, damn.
I can only imagine how often people are like, "Say the line, Trevor." Like once his characters are known for, and he's like, "Okay," you know.
Well, if you look him up, he has done hundreds of characters on Disney. I'm like, oh my god, guy's done it all. Like it's really amazing. And
Yeah, he's like a fully pro voice actor, and he I don't think he can't help but do fun voices when he's telling stories. Like we all were having dinner at Gen Con, and he was telling these hilarious stories about how he was at a bar in Spain that had a ton of people from all different backgrounds and cultures, and he was imitating every accent in person
oh my god,
flawlessly. He's so entertaining to listen to when he tells stories.
yeah, he had some pretty crazy stuff going on there.
Mhm.
That's it. But it was quite the Gen Con. It was quite the gaggle of characters. I'll tell you that much. Like,
Yeah, we had quite a posse. I didn't even expect to have so many fun people all come together, and there we were.
well, that was the thing. You said you came and you were worried because you haven't been there in 25 years. You thought you'd be like sitting by yourself in like a corner. And,
Yeah.
And little did you know that was not even close to the case. You were. It's like if anything, it was constant barragement of gaming and food and birthday parties. So
It was awesome. It was absolutely so much fun. So much fun.
yeah, that was a good Gen Con. And now
Were there even more Gen Con birthday squad people?
I don't know. Are there more people? Not.
You said there was a barrage of birthday parties.
Well,
so
because
is
she
it
had
just
two.
one person with many parties, or
She had two.
oh, okay.
Yeah, we did the whole we did the whole thing where we went out for a birthday dinner, and then I was like, all right, I'm gonna pay for the dinner because this is like in honor of my birthday, and everyone was like, no, tomorrow we have to buy you dinner to make up for it. So we ended up having 2 dinners.
Uh-huh.
So, it was kind of and plus we were all gonna get dinner anyway, so we just used the birthday as an excuse to get free cake. So
I mean, that's fair. That's fair.
Free cake.
Somehow I don't think it actually cancels out if one person buys dinner for everybody and then the next night everybody splits to buy dinner for one person. But
I karmically felt better about it though. So
that's fair. That's fair.
Oh man.
So what games do you play now for fun? Is it ShadowDark all the time? Are you still playing 5e? Like, what's your regular game? Do you have a regular game?
I do. I run ShadowDark a lot. I play when I can. I play Index Card RPG with some friends. James, my game master from Yore, is running a ShadowDark game for us on Fridays now. So I get to play in that when I can. Yeah.
Is that weird? Like you have someone running your game?
I don't know. It's weird because I'm always like, I don't know. You guys must experience this too, where if you're playing in something that you wrote, you're like, gosh, I hope it goes well for them. You're almost more worried about like them and hoping it goes okay. And like,
it's worse for me.
I also get this weird feeling when I'm playing Pathfinder 2 sometimes where it's like, the only person I have to blame for certain things is myself.
Well,
when something happens.
Well, Vanessa Hoskins in the chat, and she's playing Dragon in our game, which Mark wrote and I published, and we're always like, oh, I'm doing this. I'm like, who designed that power? It's way too powerful. She's like, you did. I'm like, oh, crap.
Yeah. You're like, I can't believe that, I laugh at my own problems that I write into the game where I'm like, oh, my constitution score, I'm going to die in one round. And whose fault is it but mine? So,
yeah.
Yep.
Literally no one else to blame. Like one of my players for the game of Strength of Thousands that I'm starting soon is decided he was going to play a mimic investigator with the feats to buy like a bunch of different items. And so he is playing basically a vending machine. So I was like, isn't there an anime that just came out about something like that? He's like, I didn't know that, but yeah, I'm just playing a vending machine. I have all these items that are in here that you can buy. And I make money to pay for my tuition by like just setting up in a location as a vending machine and selling things to people. And so he has the mimic lore skill, which lets you earn income based on knowing about mimics. He's like, can I use that to just earn income as a vending machine? I was like, yeah, okay.
So he's playing a mimic, which you wrote?
Yeah, which I wrote. I was like, I can't blame anyone for him doing this except me. Like, normally, if he was doing that, I would be like, I blame whoever like wrote some of these things that are in there. But like, literally, I wrote the mimic. I wrote the feats in the advanced player's guide that then like we put into the investigator class that he's taking. Like I am fully and 100% responsible for this, like either amazing idea or travesty to humanity that is about to occur.
You have no one to blame but yourself. Like, yep, that's how it is. That's how it is. It's funny. And I'm always afraid that like something's going to happen in the game where I'm like, I should have changed that, and then like it's too late now, but there's diminishing returns. You can always
write it down and then like do errata.
Yeah. Like 3 or 4 years of playtesting, you're going to capture about like 90% of the problems. And if there are more, well, people could survive them, I think. So
it's the old school. You could just survive it.
Yeah, you can just retcon it. You're the DM,
So there's another question in chat. How many levels would you say is the minimum number of levels to be a mega dungeon instead of just a dungeon?
Especially for OSR.
I would say 3 primary levels because that's what Caverns of Thracia, which is my favorite mega dungeon, has. It has a ton of sub levels that are optional. In fact, the best sub level in that dungeon is so well hidden that most people don't find it, and it's literally one of the coolest sub levels ever written about this like wizard lich lizard man. But yeah, I'd say 3. Like if you have 3 levels that each have between 30 and 50 rooms, that's a pretty good. That's a chunky dungeon. I would qualify that into the territory of a minimum viable mega dungeon.
Okay, I finally figured out how to get the the battery pack off. So
You did it. It's
I
been
know.
like
You
it's
did
been our quest for the entire.
it's
No.
been. I leveled up. Well, you have no idea. I found a YouTube channel that had instructions in Japanese, and they showed it for a split second, and I was like, "Oh my god!" And I was able to decipher. Look how freaking hard this is. This is
You
like
leveled up multiple times, and each time you rolled 2d6 to see what talent you got because it was ShadowDark, and you just didn't get the fix the ship talent until now.
Yeah.
Well, there's
You
no
are not
there's
you
no
are not
skills
classed
in
as a shipper.
ShadowDark. There's no skills in ShadowDark. So, I'm so excited. We're gonna finally get to see this, and you will all be amazed. Hold on, I gotta get up and get some more batteries.
I hope I actually am amazed instead of being like whelmed.
No,
I feel like Zoom's just gonna cut the sound it makes out like it did with the goblin voice because it'll be like, that can't be real, you know?
That would be hilarious.
Yeah, such a Pyrrhic victory.
no, it's gonna work. It's gonna work. It's gonna be when you see this, you're gonna be blown away, Mark. You're gonna be like, I have nowhere to put it because it's so delicate.
Oh, we can vamp while you're doing that. I see that someone in the chat, Zolgathor, is asking what is OSR, and it's like an acronym for like old school Renaissance or old school revival.
Mhm.
And the true definition of what it means is possibly the most argued thing on the internet, but it generally refers to games that are designed in the vein of original D&D. Oh, is it making the sound?
Oh, I just wanted to see if it worked.
I'm not hearing it.
Oh, I turned it off because I gotta give you the full experience, but it made the sound.
The Yamato experience.
You're gonna lose your mind.
Who else is gonna hear a real one of these? They're so rare and so hard
They're
to put the
very
battery
rare.
in.
In fact, it's so
This is our
rare.
only chance.
No one will ever see this again.
Right.
It's not
Prepare
even
audience. Once in a lifetime moment.
once in a lifetime moment. Are you ready for the spaceship Yamato? All right, hold on. Let me move my mic. You can hear. All right, here we go. This is when you turn it on. And look, the lights. Look, there's
we don't hear
lights.
it. Yeah, we see the light, but we don't hear anything.
Oh, you couldn't hear it?
Zoom filtered it.
It filtered you out.
Hold on. Wait,
Turn your
well,
filter all the way off.
Guess what? There's more. Here. Wait, let me see. Is this
Watch
on?
it be nothing again, guys. Watch it.
Like,
Can you hear it?
Absolutely not.
Really?
Wait, I just heard something that could have been an echo of you saying really, but it sounded like a very quiet sound also.
You can't hear the music?
no, I can't.
Nope.
It's so sad.
Oh,
It's
Now you're
man.
gonna
totally
have to-
canceled after
You have
all
to
that.
Screw it. I'm
you
going
have
to fix
to make
that.
a separate video about this, showing us the sounds.
Wait, I'm fixing it. I'm going to change my... Whoops. Audio settings.
He's
I'm
switching his
changing...
mic.
Oh, no. I'm going to make it so there's no tolerance. Hold on.
Oh yeah, turn it off. Yeah.
Yeah, test the... Okay, volume. There we go. Now I'm going to be super... I'm going to turn off...
This
here
is
we go.
happening, everyone. We're gonna hear the battleship Yamato.
We were
Zoom cannot
promised.
Stop it.
Here we go. Are you ready? All right, here we go.
Nothing can stop battleship Yamato.
How does his mic unhook like that?
It's like a transformer.
Can you hear it?
I heard like a doop very, very quietly. And that was it. Nope. Sorry, Steven.
Oh man, it is so freaking cool. I'm actually really pissed. Wait, I'm gonna get it to work.
So sad. You should record it like on your phone and then
Yeah,
post the
record it.
audio clip somewhere.
Yeah. Put the audio clip in the description.
No, that's a good idea.
People will get confused, like, why is this audio clip in the description of this video? Why
Okay,
is it
wait.
so important? And Steven is like, of the 2 hours that we, or however long this video is, this
No,
is the
I'm
most
actually pissed because wait
important
till you
thing.
when you hear this, you're gonna be like, "Holy crap!" All right, that's it. I'm gonna record it and then I'm gonna play it. I'm gonna get this on here. if it kills me, I'm gonna do it. Because when you hear this, you're gonna be like, "What the hell's going on?" All right, hold on. You guys talk amongst yourselves.
If it kills him.
It's gonna kill me. I'm gonna do it. Yeah,
Now
my
we
mic does.
Steven is like,
I'm doing it. Here we go.
Steven is looking at this sound thing, and he's like, "From hell's heart, I stab at thee."
I know. He's like, I will die on this hill, and I'm here for it, honestly. My sound tolerance is about to go angry because I have to turn my air conditioning on. I had it off, but it's Las Vegas in the summer because it makes so much background noise. Let me know if this is disruptive. Let me see. It's 80 degrees in my house right now.
I don't hear it yet.
Let me see if I can get it to work. Can you hear it?
Nope.
Zoom's doing its job.
Good work, Zoom. I mean, he may turn it off so it doesn't, but like, Steven, if we go back to Wednesday and we're playing Daggerheart, all you have to do to get the sound to work is to die and choose to die in a blaze of glory and then automatically succeed at whatever you're doing. So that's exactly what you proposed.
He keeps rolling the dice on this and getting like crit failures. It's like he's gonna succeed if he keeps trying.
Crit failures are always the most memorable thing. That
was actually one sound effect I recorded because that's how long it is. It was a minute. That's how I'm like, you got to hear it. I'm gonna get this to work.
People never remember like their string of basic successes. They don't really remember like failures that just kind of are a setback that you just are like, oh, okay. But when you get that weird crit failure that does something ridiculous, then that's the thing people won't forget. Like the wizard's not gonna forget when they do an ethereal Bandersnatch mishap in ShadowDark, and then their two most valuable pieces of equipment like disappear forever. Like 10 years later, they're still going to be angry probably about that.
Yes, that is so true. That is so true. It is true that the best stories kind of come out of the worst, like natural one type situations. I even, some of the stuff I remember that was the most hilarious and memorable were totally those, or the occasional outrageous success that shouldn't have happened. Like the person who like, I don't remember where this story came from, but people were fighting a ancient red dragon, something really bad, and they concocted this entire plan this might have even been the Critical Role crew for all I know. They concocted a plan to activate Adairn's instant fortress as like in the air above it and to have it fall onto the dragon and crush it. I think this might have been before there were like damage caps on falling objects and stuff, like in a prior edition of D&D. And so they pulled their plan off and it worked, and I feel like that should be celebrated.
Always funny when you do some kind of weird solution, or when the dice just go absolutely wild and just are like, nope, the PCs are going to win. But the critical failures can usually, in just one roll, do something that is often more memorable because of just whatever ridiculous thing happens.
Yes, that's why the dice are fun, because you just, when you don't know what's going to happen.
Actually, I'm trying to tell it to stop.
As long as your system encourages it, which ShadowDark does. Yeah,
it's funny. Spell failures for spellcasters are particularly angsty, but that's seemingly they happen 5% of the time. But because there's a luck subsystem, they actually happen a much
there are some cool
fraction.
things I can show you. All right, so first of all, there's the lights on the ship, and then look.
Yeah, we did see that.
The engine lights up.
Oh, it's red.
So the engine does light up. And, well, this thing is pretty cool, and then it's got the little guns. It's actually playing right now. It's like it's a full orchestra. That's what I'm like. It's like it's not even fair.
It's all being canceled.
It's all being canceled. So I'm gonna anti-cancel it because I figured out. Well, now it's a challenge because I'm like Mr. Computer. It's what I do for a living. So how dare this thing try to cancel me?
Are you Friend Computer from Paranoia?
Yes, I am Friend Computer.
Friend Computer.
I don't even know.
You don't even know what we're talking
the
about.
Paranoia RPG. Friend Computer is like the GM, and it's an supposedly omnibenevolent ruler of this utopian place.
No, it's not. It kills everyone.
I said supposedly. Supposedly. But
you're supposed to treat it.
You have like 6 clones of your character because you're just constantly being killed by the other players or the computer or just the environment for like anything you do. for being disloyal or going against your like color coded access level.
You're just killed.
Yeah,
Like, that's
ultraviolet. Remember that? That
the
was the highest
original.
level.
The ultraviolet was the highest level.
Yes, I remember.
And infrared was the lowest level.
Yeah.
infrared.
Yeah, well, it was really cool because actually I played that a lot when that came out. You had 6 characters, and they're all clones, so you would kill each other constantly until you like ran out, and it was just ridiculous. It was so much fun. It's still out now. It just celebrated like its 40th anniversary. It's
I've
actually
never gotten to play it, which is a shame. But it sounds like the original Gauntlet.
it
was very odd, and everybody
really
had a
weird.
role like the loyalty officer
really
that was
weird.
just giving drugs out to everybody. Very dystopian 1984 ruled by a computer setting.
So like everything you did, like you're like, you just did something illegal, kill him, and then you die. And like it was very OSR because if you literally, you didn't know what the rules were, so you'd be like, that's how you'd have to like, you'd like I'm down to 5 clones, and then you do this, like now I'm down to 4. Like you just would learn the hard way of how to survive in the society, and yeah,
and it's humorous. I have to say that like in old school games, this often gets overlooked. A lot of times character death is kind of funny. I know that sounds a little heartless, but it's there's a certain level of humor to getting killed in a really absurd way that can't be ignored. And I think that's a big element to old school style play, because the assumption is characters are so easy to make, and your character's not coming in with a heavy backstory. Your backstory is the things that you do over time. So losing a character is in some ways kind of funny, at least to my group, especially in gauntlets. There's supposed to be some comedic death in gauntlets.
So what happens when they die? Like, do you just have them keep going, or is it like, because like in DCC you have literally 4 characters, so when they die you just pick up another one? It's very similar to
you just have a plausible reason why a new character walks on scene. So it's, there's some roll tables I made in one of the supplements that has a gauntlet adventure to help with that. But you're like, oh, look, we come into this room and there's a prisoner tied to the wall. It's your new character,
So someone in chat was wondering how we would mod Pathfinder 2e to be an OSR style version of Pathfinder 2e while still being Pathfinder 2e. I think that would be pretty challenging, because of the fact that some of the fundamentals in Pathfinder 2e are sort of not in the direction of OSR. Now, there are critical failures, so that is one of the things that gets encouraged in there. I would say they in the person in chat had some suggestions too of like take away the proficiency bonus with level. That's a good start, because then characters don't advance as much when it comes to the math, and it means that like low level monsters can wind up rando killing you more easily, which definitely does feel a little more OSR. You'd probably want to release it with a supplement that contained a lot of D100 tables to help for Emergent style gameplay. Change the death and dying mechanics probably to be more lethal than they currently are.
Just a word.
To be a little closer there. You may want to actually like simplify the skill system to have fewer skills and make things like sort of more just describe what you're doing in player skill, where it's like, oh well, if your character doesn't know how to like crack a safe by what you're going to do with that, or so if your player doesn't know how to do the right steps with the safe, you just can't open it. It doesn't matter if your character is a master lockpick, because in player skill is more important in OSR, that you have to specifically describe what you're doing rather than just assume your character knows it from the storyline. And so build in more of those elements, add in, instead of the default ancestry background class giving you automatic stat boost, use rolling and go to 3d6 instead of 4d6 drop lowest. Just be very brutal about that. Maybe roll hit points instead of automatically getting 10 or 12 or 8, roll a d8 and a d10 and a d12. So, there's steps you could take to make it more OSR-like. But I think even if you did all of those things, that it's just kind of a robust enough system in terms of it doing a lot, and OSR tries to do a little bit less, that it's not gonna scratch the itch all the way, I think.
I think that's a fair assessment. I think too that Pathfinder has emphasis on character building because that's one of the really beautiful, like rich components of it. And it's funny, but it's almost like counterintuitive to the way that OSR games work because your character is almost supposed to be like transactional to you until they gain more power throughout the levels. And the reason sometimes why it's not so painful to have one die is because it is a randomly generated character that you couldn't optimize and couldn't try to invest so much energy into making like a more in-depth kind of character. So yeah, like that sort of hands-off character creation approach leads to the different mentality in OSR games and especially surrounding character death.
For sure. You could take out feats and some of the other customizable options so that it was quicker and easier to make a character. Maybe choose some representative feats that you think you're like, oh, well, the fighter's sudden charge feat is a cool one at first level that lots of different kinds of fighters can use. So we'll just throw that in that everybody gets that. And maybe you pick if your fighter is an archer, like a sword and shield or a two-hander, and we'll add in like these things that would have been selectable features automatically so that it's quick, it's fast to build the character, and you don't have to do a lot of selection and customization all the time.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I actually got it to work. It's
people were saying
now.
that it was so loud that it was over.
It loaded right away. I didn't mean to do that. But I sent it to you. But this is actually, it plays this theme song from the TV show, and it's pretty insane. It actually has sound effects when you shoot there's like a battle music, there's sound effects, there's all this stuff, and you can mix it. And there's like a little mixing board, and it all comes out. And in fact, I'm playing it right now for people to hear. They can hear it. I put it pretty low.
I have to listen back so I can hear it in the replay of the video.
No, I sent it to you in Discord.
Oh, okay.
So you guys,
well, I'll listen to it after
I know later, but it's
go.
actually pretty funny. I'm like, all right, I'm going to get this in here one way or the other. Come hell or high water. I'm getting that music in there. This is thanks, music. Vanessa. This is evidence that Steve is just a big old child who loves his toys. It's not that I love my toys. Is Vanessa, who also works in technology or knows the challenge. Haven't you ever seen you get a technology challenge and you need to overcome it? And the technology challenge is how do I get the audio into this thing and so people can hear it. And that was the challenge. So there we go. There we go. See, she says that. So is it true that OSR games have instant death traps with no saves?
I wouldn't call that good design. Some do, but you have to have tells. When a character dies in an ideal situation in an OSR game, the player should know it was their fault. So, yeah, of course, there are some save versus death things in old style things, but I in ShadowDark tried to eradicate those coming at the characters. Some characters have save versus death effects that they can impose on NPCs or monsters, but I did not do much of that coming at the player characters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I didn't see very many at all that were an instant kill when I was looking through, because the topic the title of the episode was about death, so I specifically searched for how many things could kill you.
Well,
I'm sure some OSR are deadlier than others, but generally, I think it depends on the meta and the expected meta that the people who are playing and running those OSR games assumes from people, and they would always say it's your mistake if you died. But in some of them, it would be like, well, the GM described there was a rug on the floor. And if you didn't say, I'm checking under the rug, then, but you did say, I'm stepping into the room, and you didn't have a 10-foot pole or something like that, then it was your mistake. You should never step into a room with a rug without using your 10-foot pole to nudge it over in case there was a circle with a magic symbol that automatically kills you on the floor. And if that's the game's social contract and it's meta, then it might feel really unfair and frustrating the first time that happens, but eventually you either stop playing the game or you learn that meta and you don't do the same thing again. And it's not right for everyone, but it is right for the people who want to follow that meta.
Yeah, that's such a good way to put it. I'm going to refer back to you saying that when people ask about that, because it is really a part of the social contract that and there's going to be like, there's some learning pain for someone coming into that mentality who's not familiar with it. So part of it, again, like player skill is also really tied to player experience.
Also, in the beginning of your book, you actually say telegraph, and I'm a firm believer in that. Like, you have okay. So there's a famous story I've told, or semi-famous, or famous for me, is that there was an adventure I played a long time ago, and this is like D&D first edition, and someone was climbing up a ladder, and then the DM's like, oh, your character's dead. It's like, what do you mean your character's dead? It's like, you died. It's like, that's it? It's like, yep. And like, okay. And then someone else did, and they're like, yeah, you died too. And I'm like, what's happening? And it turned out there was like a trap that was like one-shotting them and killing them, and they had like they're failing their saves. And like, I was thinking that, I'm like, they were so pissed that they like never wanted to play again because they didn't have a chance. It was just like, okay, that might have been realistic, but that's not narrative. That's not giving your players a chance to react to the trap. And, you know, it's just not a good way to play. And if anything, I telegraph way too much. I, in fact, tell people, like, we've had shows on this, like, oh, you're fighting the boss. Like, you know you're fighting the boss. Get ready. Or you know you're fighting this monster's I'll give you a free knowledge check. This monster's way too tough for you, you know? So they know what to expect, so they're not just going in and like, oh, I'll just cast my level 1 spells and see what happens. It's like, Vanessa's on the chat. She knows because they were fighting this hag.
No, she did. She said that she agreed.
Oh, yeah, but we were fighting a hag. She was fighting a hag, and they were like, oh, this is easy. Until the umbral dragon showed up and breathed void mist all over everyone and nearly killed everyone. And then all of a sudden the hag did ethereal jaunt and disappeared, and everyone's like, oh crap. Like, and then they woke up and realized, okay, we gotta pay attention. Like, this became a very hard encounter very quickly, and they really had to like bring their A game, because it was, but it was telegraphed. Like, they knew they were gonna fight it. If anything, it was like, oh, this is too easy, we're just winning, this is a joke. And then the dragon appeared, and then they're like, okay, we're not winning anymore. And like, now we're in deep trouble. And they were. So, but I think that's how you have to do if you're going to do this OSR stuff, is that you have to telegraph, you have to give them a chance, because otherwise it's just not fun. It's like, oh, I just died, that's it, thanks. So.
Yeah, it's funny, like, people, I think that a lot of people, especially when we were younger, most likely, you go through a phase of being a game master or an adventure writer or something where you maybe think that the whole point of it is to antagonize the players or to put barriers into place against them.
That's how Gary Gygax played. That was his style. So a lot of people emulated that back in the day. There's
certainly the argument to be said that he was so mean. But it's really interesting to note that his best or his most skillful players treated like, the Tomb of Horrors as a cakewalk. Like one of his characters got through the whole thing playing as a solo character with some hired, retainers and henchmen, without ever dying, because he just understood Gary's style so well, and also understood, like, he knew sort of what to look for. He had learned so much from Gary what to look for, that he had become this incredibly skillful player for the kinds of games that Gary ran. So it's weird, but I don't know if you guys agree with this, but I feel like the point of a trap isn't to be punitive. It's to give the characters a chance to feel rewarded for their skills and for playing well. Like, the end result you want from a trap is for the characters to overcome it and feel like they did something cool.
Yeah,
I think it varies from trap to trap what its goal in the story would be, or for a hazard in general, because some of them aren't like a trap that was built by someone. It could be like a yellow mold, or like an avalanche, or a haunt. Sometimes the trap is about storytelling, especially with haunts, where they have some unfinished business or some reason why this place is haunted. Like, the trap tells part of the story of the dungeon. Sometimes it's absolutely about that feeling of feeling good that you looked in the right place if you're an OSR, or that your character is a cool trap finding rogue who automatically gets a chance to spot them if you're doing like a Pathfinder 2nd edition. And then it's like a validating for either you as the player or your class fantasy. It's like, yes, that is not only why my character is the best trapsmith in the kingdom, but it's why they brought me along. Like if it wasn't here, then they wouldn't have needed someone who has all these trap finding skills. But also they sometimes tell a story of like the weird bad things that happen to you when the trap goes off, but they should be interesting. And that's why I think I agree with Kelsey that the one that just kills you when you made a mistake, yes, a lot of old school games did that. You would see it in old school D&D adventures all the time, but that's not interesting. In some ways, that's letting someone that's the easy way out. Like the one that does something nasty, or maybe it warps the character so they're now separated from the rest of the party in another room in the dungeon, and there's not a good way to get there, or that makes the story continue in a way that's interesting and that makes people think and be like, oh, this is not the same as the other encounters without the traps. I think that death is one of the least interesting things you can do with the trap. And if you're not in a gauntlet.
I completely agree. Like the result of death from a trap is the least interesting outcome. It is a possibility with some traps. It shouldn't be a secret, but a trap is really a mechanism to reward the players with either information or validation. So, I feel like just like the punitive effect of the trap, if people don't look beyond that, they're really not looking into the purpose of the trap's existence,
Well, I think, you see, when traps exist by themselves, they, I think, are, unless they tell a story, they're kind of pointless, because you like, oh, I set off the trap. Okay, I heal myself. That's it. Like, that's what happens. So when I do traps, either A, I like to have it part of a story and it makes sense, or 95% of the time I put traps in combat. And then it gets really messed up because you are fighting and then things are going off, and then it becomes a whole other level, because then the environment is part of the encounter, and I love doing that. In one of our games, oh my god, it was the best one, god, and we still talk about it. This is a good use of traps, is that the thief went down this hallway, and the hallway was shooting darts at him, and he was trying to get to the end, and it's an L-shaped hallway. It's very long. So he's like running down the hallway, and he's just getting shot full of darts and just taking tons of damage. But there's 3 doors, and all of them are false doors, and all of them then did damage to him. And at the very end is the final door, and he opened up every single false door and got a face full of explosives every single time. And man, were we laughing at him? And he's like, yeah, it was great for me. It's great for the other players. He doesn't mind. This is, you got to know your player too. Like he's like, I'm a thief, but I'm like, dude, you're failing every roll. I'm making the rolls and you are failing them all. I could show you if you want. And he believed me, but it was very funny because he missed every time. He missed a perception check, and then he barely made it through. And that's a fun and funny use for traps. Not killing him, but bringing him to the very brink of death. And now we all make fun of him because he's a bad thief. So
a story emerged from his thieving.
Exactly. Traps that cause an encounter or that are part of the encounter are memorable. Like, here's a good example of that: the trash compactor scene in Star Wars. Right?
Yeah.
It's a trap that also has a creature that's in that encounter, and it's a scene that people remember as one of the more memorable trap scenes. And sure, you have some that are just like in Indiana Jones.
I was about to say Indiana Jones. Yeah, that's all.
There are some that are just a trap that are not an encounter that you can still remember from Indiana Jones, but those are ones that when you're actually playing the game are not always as interesting as you would hope they would be from Indiana Jones. But the Star Wars track compactor fight, I've done something like that before in a game, and it definitely gets the players sweating. And I guess in a similar way to like the light going down in ShadowDark, because there's this monster they're fighting. There's this other thing that is a doomsday clock that is eventually going to smash them if they don't deal with it.
Yeah, you're very right about that. Was one of the intentions behind including it, is that I feel like time, like real world time constraints. It's actually a trick I learned from when I was a teacher, where I was teaching English language to people, and in order to get students to act, if you put even a small real world timer in front of them, they would stop, getting so much time getting lost in the weeds and thinking through what they were going to say, and they would just speak, and it would actually lead to a lot more cool stuff coming from them. And so I was like, yeah, if you have this world timer that's really impacting the players themselves, they're more inclined to take action, and it pushes the action. And so while adding a sense of pressure, and that's that's what you want.
Yeah,
that's what I wanted.
I think real world timer, that was genius, because the first time I ever saw real world timer was in Toon. And Toon is a role-playing game. It's actually still around, very popular, is that you played a cartoon character, and it was very funny. And the thing about it is, if you died, no one dies in cartoons. So what happened is, if you died, you were out of the game for 3 minutes of real time. And let me tell you, during those 3 minutes, you could not believe how fast the other players would be like rushing to get their stuff done, because it was usually competitive or something was happening. They're like, oh my God, okay, go. And they're like rolling as quickly as possible because like the timer's on, and they're like, there was actually the one at Mark probably heard this example. It was a foot race, and they're rolling 2d6s, and to successfully, it was 100 yards, and to go 10 yards, one character had to roll a 3 or lower, and another character had to roll a 4 or lower. Okay, so that was it. A 3 or lower or 4 or lower. And every time they failed, they fell down and took damage. So they got like halfway through, one fell down, and like you got 3 minutes, and they're like, oh my God, and they're rolling as fast as possible to try to like win the race. And then they were down and they were out. And it was like hockey, where you had like, okay, you got a minute, and okay, you're out of the penalty box, go. And then the other player's like going as fast as possible. And I always remember, I'm like, God, it was so much fun to see people really pick it up and actually play, realizing there's external pressures that are real world. So I like this idea of like, oh yeah, you have an hour. So you guys are going to sit around and talk for the next 20 minutes? Or are you going to start walking? Because you're going to die. I'm like, good.
Yeah, it's great when people are like, it stops rules arguments, because I'm like, yeah, your torch is burning. Argue as much as you want.
Yeah, well, analysis paralysis. Like a lot of games. I mean, we can do a whole episode on that. A lot of games have analysis paralysis. I see it all the time, because you give them so many options, and they're like, oh, what should we do? Should we do this? Should we do this? And now a lot of players like to sit there and do that. Like my players like to do that. They like to sit around and talk about it for half an hour, and that's fine. I don't mind. And it's part of the fun. They like to analyze and see, because I also give them a lot of options. But at the same time, eventually, we do the enough talk. Let's go. Like, okay, talk is over. What are you doing? Something's coming, and I start moving them along. Like, I only let them do it for so long. But here it's like, you can just... So what happens when the torch goes out? You said everything gets deadly, or what is exactly the mechanic when the torch does go out?
Yeah, well, no player characters have dark vision, and all the monsters do. So that's very old school. I mean, logically, it almost doesn't make sense. It's absolutely an abstraction, but it causes characters to have all of the associated trouble when they can't see. So pretty much disadvantage on every ability check or attack roll they'd be making. And the monsters often have the opposite. The monsters are probably going to have advantage because they can see you and you can't see them. So it also makes the adventuring environment become deadly, which means that you're checking for a random encounter now every round of gameplay.
Oh my God.
Which a random encounter doesn't always mean a combat encounter. There should be a variety of things that could happen on a random encounter list, but like an environmental effect or something. But it's representative of the characters blundering around in the darkness, making a ton of noise and attracting attention. So things get real bad. Funnily enough, torches just always go out during combat for some reason. It happens all the time, which is really fun because it makes the character who can light the torch like the hero of the moment. Because man, when you have disadvantage and everything and the monsters have advantage on attacking you, as the person in the chat said earlier, things are not going to go well for you very quickly. So
that's a plus or minus like 11 swing there. That's very bad.
It's really just like you're going to die. So
yeah, that's basically death. In Pathfinder, you get a +1 and you're happy. Here, it's like a +11. I'm like, okay, you're going to die. So
it's pretty gnarly.
How do they get more light on the torches, though?
You can carry torches. They take up inventory space, and there's a pretty strict inventory system to support that. There are light spells. They could find more torches or more sources of light in the game. So I think if you have like a wizard or a priest with a light spell and you go in with 4 or 5 torches, that's enough to carry you through an adventuring session. Most groups will want to have more than 1 torch lit at a time because you really can't see that far with one anyway. So usually like the rear rank and the front rank will have torches. Monsters don't like light, and so they will sometimes attack the person holding it or try to douse it. Environmental hazards can cause the torches to go out. So it's not supposed to be a sure thing. The resources, there's meant to be some uncertainty about, can you actually continue to push your luck with the amount of light resource that you have left?
Did you ever play Darkest Dungeon?
No, isn't that a video game?
Yes.
Yeah,
everyone
but it also
asks
has
me.
torches.
Because that's the main encounter, is that you have a torch and you're basically done. It's the same game. It's very similar.
Everyone asks me that. This is like, what is this called? Synchronicity, when like 2 people invent the light bulb at the same time. Like, I know of Darkest Dungeon. I've never played it.
It gets very, so there's a mechanic and there's a torch and it's very hard, and it's very, very hard. And you're just literally going through the dungeon. And as you go through it, the torch is going out. And if it gets to 75%, as long as it's above 75, you're pretty good. 50, it's about equal. 25%, the monsters start getting much stronger, and then when it goes out, oof, you're dead. Like, you're in real trouble. Like, and there's ways for you to bring it back, but it's, it takes resources. So you gotta keep moving, or you gotta be very careful with where you're exploring. And it's always the push and pull, because and it'll show on the map, like, well, I can go down this hall and get treasure, but it's going to take up a lot of my torch, because then they're going to come back, because it's like a one-way hallway. So that will take up like 20% of your torch. So is it worth it or not? So
yeah, that's really interesting. I feel like one thing, knowing that if characters are always calculating, or if players are always calculating their actions based on torch time, or like how much they perceive they have left, it can actually be a little too stressful. So I was originally going to have torches last a half hour each of real time. And it just became so, omnipresent in the characters almost couldn't play the game because they were too obsessed with the light. And so, yeah, it was actually really weird. So I made it an hour, and that actually seemed like the sweet spot, because people almost start to forget about it. And then, you can always bring their attention back to it, like, oh, your torch is starting to get low. And they're like, oh, okay. But we had an hour on it, right? And that's right about the sweet spot where it'll go out during combat because they forgot about it for 10 minutes, So
Darkest Dungeon
weird.
Also has an insanity mechanic. So it's both. It's like the torch is going out, and every time you're hit against monsters, your insanity meter goes up. And then once it gets up to 100, you have to make checks, and they either have resolve and they pull through and something good happens, or they literally have a mental break, and they either go temporary insane or permanently insane, and like have permanent scars on their characters that you can very expensively get rid of. And it's basically like your game and Call of Cthulhu mixed into one game.
I was gonna say, is it very Cthulhu, like where it's inevitable that you're gonna either go crazy or
you're
die?
Literally fighting Cthulhuid monsters. That is the game. And the style, it's fantastic. I mean, you can get it for nothing. The sequel came out. The sequel's okay. The sequel is like, it feels very like the first game was, what it feels like? It feels like Darkest Dungeon was OSR, and the sequel was 5th edition. Like it was kind of made by committee. They didn't make it as hard. They didn't make it as tough. Like it felt like people were, they were like, oh, it's too hard. It's too punishing, which is actually why I liked it. I'm like, oh yeah, like you really had to.
I like really punishing games, and I thought Dark Souls, when I played it, was not that hard. I was surprised why I had heard people talk up, this is so hard. I was like, didn't seem that bad.
I was
like,
you and I've had this discussion. Those are monster
I was
closets.
like, this area seemed kind of hard, but then I turned out that I had gone to an area that I wasn't supposed to even be in. Darkest Dungeon, I bounce, though, and not because it's hard, but because of the fact there's a meta progression and an individual run, some random thing happening can wipe out, like, 50 runs from your meta progression and just, send you back to square zero because of the fact that because of the way that certain things are carried over. And I did hear that number 2 is completely roguelike.
They got rid of
you
that.
don't carry over things that can screw up your meta progression, and I think I would like that better. But I would like it to be hard, each individual run to be hard. I just don't want losing a run to also mean that now I've lost almost everything that I've done across all of my runs. If you see what I mean.
You have to get...
too punitive.
Well, it works very similar to OSR. You have... If you don't have 4 characters, because you end up having...
I mean, it doesn't work that similar to OSR. If you could just bring a character in, that would be fine. That'd be one thing.
You can.
But you can't. There's just a new character that is not ready for what you were doing before. I literally had this happen where all of my characters who were even remotely relevant or capable of doing what I wanted to be doing got wrecked.
Well, you got to balance.
They could never be used again.
You need to have
to completely hire new people or use my backup people who were terrible. And I felt like I just lost a massive amount.
You're completely right. You have to have like a stable of like 15, 20 characters, and you got to rotate them in. They only get up to 6th level. That's the highest level you can get, and then that's it. 6 levels in. So. And getting levels 1 through 3 is very easy when you're later in the game. So you can bring new characters in. You kind of got to baby them and bring them up. So then you can you're completely right. But you can go to easier areas. It does suck a little, but...
but do I want to do a run where I go to an easier area that is not the place that is actually progressing anything? Just grind multiple runs that aren't going to do anything to get up these characters again? I agree. Like, that is...
No, you're right.
That's not what I get into the
By the
game
way, you're completely right. I strongly disagree. Now we're like in video game world. Dark Souls are those are monster closets. I don't like that design mechanic. But Elden Ring... That is a masterpiece, and that was done correctly. And do you play any video games, Kelsey, or not really?
I'm a huge Zelda junkie. I think we talked about.
All right. You have your Zelda tattoo.
And Pokemon, right?
And Pokemon, yes.
Zelda and Pokemon.
And like here and there, I'll dabble. Like when I had COVID, I got really into Stardew Valley.
Oh, really?
Like a farm simulator.
Yeah, I know Stardew. Yeah.
Very popular.
I was just wondering because it's like because it's like, well, you have a game that's very OSR, and if you play there's just a lot of OSR video games that would be very similar. And I was like, oh, do you like play those and try to get ideas, or something like that, or just... I
do sometimes. Well, you might be able to guess what one of my top 3 Zelda games. Like, I Ocarina of Time and Breath of the Wild are my favorites. But my third one is probably the most hated one in the franchise, and it is extremely telling for the kind of game that I like, but it's Zelda 2, which is the side-scrolling...
I was thinking you were going to say Zelda 2.
I thought you were going to say Minish Cap, which I love. I love Minish Cap. That's one of my favorites. Or the train one. A lot of people hated the train one.
Phantom Tracks?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what?
Yeah, the Game Boy ones.
Yeah, well, first of all, I was alive when Zelda came out, and Zelda 2. And I finished Zelda 2 and played with my friends. The thing with Zelda 2 is, don't forget, they designed it because Mario Brothers was so popular at the time. So it was like, hey, let's take Mario Brothers and Zelda and combine it and see what we get. And that's back when they were experimenting. And it didn't quite work, but that's what they were trying to do. And they wanted to try something out. And it's fine. I mean, it's not the worst game ever.
It's a very hard game. That's why people hate it. Yeah.
Oh, really? I don't know. I finished that.
I mean, I don't think it's impossible. You just have to be willing to it's got the 3 life structure, you know, and
Yeah.
if you lose
I
your
don't
3
know.
lives, you go right back to Hyrule Castle and you retain your advancement, but
Uh-huh.
you start over at a really inconvenient place in the map. So it's honestly, I think it's really hard. I think it's a pretty hard one. I think it's the
Really?
hardest Zelda game. The hardest Zelda game
I
by
guess. Well, also
Mhm.
back then, I used to be so good. Now I'm sure if I played it now, I'd die in 2 seconds. But back then, I played. I got Mega Man like right after I finished Zelda 1, and we couldn't figure out. We're sitting there, me and my friends. I had to go over to my friend's house every day, and we'd play video games and play Talisman every day. That's what we did, and we couldn't figure out how to get through this game. Like we would get halfway through, and we couldn't figure it out. And then Mega Man, you have the ability to, and whenever you defeat a bad guy, you can become them.
Yeah,
And
you can take the power from the boss.
instructions were so bad that none of us knew that, and we're playing for weeks. And then I accidentally hit the button where I became like Scissor Man, and I'm like, oh, and we're all like, oh my god! And then we like destroyed it and won the game right then. And they were like, I was like, I didn't know you could become the bad guy. No wonder we couldn't get through this game. And then we finished it, and very quickly. And that game is insanely hard. So I must have been a lot better at video games back then when I was a kid.
You must have.
I
That's
must have
so
been.
funny
Maybe.
that you were like winning at it without knowing all of these buffs, and then the second you got them, you were like God mode. You're like, oh, I'm the best at this.
That's
game.
exactly what happened. Because we like literally couldn't get through. You can get through about half the game without the buffs, and we couldn't figure out like we're missing something. And then we literally pressed the button, and I'm like, oh, because it's a cool transformation when he turns. It does this like, and it turns him into the bad guy, and you're like, oh. And then we were all stunned. But that's what makes these games so much fun, is like when you find these things. And I think that's what makes the OSR. I mean, I have so many of those life and death stories, and none of them are. I mean, how many times can you say, oh, remember that fun time when we went into the dungeon and the bad guy was there and we killed him in 2 rounds? Wasn't that fun? No one ever says that because it's not freaking fun. No one cares. It's more like, oh, do you remember when we fought the bad guy and the encounter took 2 months of real time because it was so freaking hard and complex, which is really what I did in my game. I'm like, yeah, that's fun. That's memorable. Not, oh yeah, we won in 2 rounds. Who cares? No, you'll never remember those ever.
Yeah, stuff's only fun when it's hard. In my opinion, it's only fun when it's hard to achieve. Like with the proverbial Pokemon example too, which like I'm assuming that you both played the original Pokemon games, Red and Blue, when they came out,
A
or
long time ago, but yeah.
a long time
Yeah,
ago.
yeah, yeah.
And like
I only played one of them, not both.
I didn't
They
play
were
both. I
only
almost
played
exactly
one.
the
Yeah.
same
I
game.
only played one.
I could only afford one with
I only
my
played
allowance.
one.
and
I don't
so-
My
remember
little
which one.
brother got the other one, and we traded the exclusive ones to each other so that we would have them both.
Oh yeah, my friends and I coordinated. We had like a Pokemon ring going on, and but I remember there was this annoying hack where you could get, infinite rare candies, which, every time you feed a rare candy to a Pokemon, they gain a level. And so I
with
figured this
Missing
hack
No
out.
on Cinnabar Island
Missing
on
No.
the East Coast.
Yeah, you cruise up and down, and then so I did that and like leveled all my Pokemon up to 99, and I was like, yes, this is what I've been striving for, is the most powerful Pokemon, and then just trashed the game in 3 seconds, and I was like, that wasn't fun. That wasn't fun. There was nothing difficult about that. I thought what I wanted was to be level 99 with all my Pokemon, but what I actually wanted was to struggle to win.
Yeah. It reminds me of a time that Steven was playing a game and he found a God mode cheat and he turned it on. He'd been playing the game for a while, but then like within 15 minutes he put it down and he never played the game again.
He knew I was going to say that story
So-
because I was just thinking that same story. It's like, yep.
You guys know each other.
Yeah.
It ruins it for you. Like in Stardew Valley, when you get truffle pigs, or like, this isn't fun anymore. I don't know.
Well,
My-
it's very
my
simple
truffle pigs.
because storytelling, I do like a storytelling talk, and storytelling is conflict. And without conflict, there's no story. Everything is conflict. That's why combat works so well, because it's literally naturally conflict. But if there's no conflict, there's no story, period. And that's all storytelling in all mediums, including board games, or any game, really. Like, you need conflict. And, there's different types of conflict. It could be sports, which have a different type of conflict than, say, Scrabble, which have a different conflict than a video game or a role-playing game. Like, but if there's no conflict, there's no fun. It's simple as that, and you have to have it.
Why are we wired like this, us humans? We want things to be conflicted to derive entertainment from them. It's so funny. It's why we've progressed as a species.
Yes and no, because there's a big new genre of games called comfy games, and like Dave the Diver or Stardew Valley. Stardew Valley is a comfy game, and so was Animal Crossing.
Animal Crossing,
yeah, those are all comfort games. Because
I mean, you still go into a mine and attack things in Stardew Valley, as
correct,
opposed to some of the other ones.
But those are management games, so that's the conflict. The conflict comes from the management of your time and your resources. That's the conflict.
Yes, it's true.
Mm-hmm. So
Stardew Valley has conflict, but it's a different variety. Correct. It's a bit more of a long-term, self-driven. The stakes are simply that I don't achieve it faster. There's not like you're gonna lose a bunch of stuff. Yeah.
There's Jojo Mart versus the Junimos, right? Like I haven't played it, but Linda played it so long. She has Junimo plushies in our house, so I know there's like an evil Jojo Mart and these little Junimos, and only people who are truly heartless or are trying to get the last Steam achievements would ever side with the evil Jojo Mart.
Oh, in Stardew Valley, you can either choose to like save the town, or you can choose to like go in with the corporate guys, and you know, we've all seen how that goes with last 6 months of the gaming industry.
Do you play board games at all, Kelsey?
Very rarely. I feel like I always feel like I'm sort of a dysfunctional gamer because I'm so obsessed with the very small number of games that I love. It's again why I don't play a ton of video games. I play like the ones that I deeply love, and I've never been a big board gamer. I've never been one. I when I was growing up, it was either Dungeons and Dragons or Magic the Gathering. Like those were my, and I tried to go deep on both of those, to the exclusion.
I'm gonna whip it out. Mark.
Got magic cards.
Oh, I got something better.
Don't whip it out, Steven.
Ta-da! Look at that.
Oh, look at that!
4-digit DCI number.
Dude, what? That's wild.
I know. 4 digits.
Oh my God. That is wild. That's just, you hear things like this. Like my Dungeon Master James, he had been at a convention. I think he went to like Gamma or something way back in the day when Magic was just being paraded around the trade shows for the very first time. And for attending, he got like a sealed box or like something, like half a box of boosters. And he had no interest in the game. And so he was like, yeah, I'll just, I'll give these to some of the kids at the local game store and they'll enjoy it. And cool. Well, they're ripping black lotuses, like alpha black lotuses out of these packs and stuff. And he's just like, I still kick myself.
Well, it was...
Yeah,
it was a weird time, but who knew? Because you know what? See, everyone always says that because like everyone's like, "Oh, D&D." When D&D was popular, there was 100 other role-playing games. When Magic came out, there was 100 other trading card games. A new one was coming out every week, and some of them were more popular than Magic. There was a lot of games, and not only that, the cards were all over the place. There was like this one called the Hive, which no one uses now and no one's probably even heard of. That was one of the most popular cards, and that was worth a ton. Like the cards that were worth a lot of money are worthless now. And I mean, yeah, the Moxes and the Lotuses and the Time Walks and stuff, those were always powerful, but it was just a different time. Like you just didn't know what it was going to become. So
people hadn't learned the game yet.
Yeah. But it was really, really popular. That's
could you imagine like a big blue deck back in the day when like there were no restrictions on Lotuses or Moxes? You're like, I've got 4 Ancestor Recalls, 4 Moxes,
guess what?
4 Time Walks.
I have that. I have.
That's Steven's deck.
I'm getting my deck.
That's your deck. Oh, he's getting one. But I can only imagine how weird stuff was during that era.
Pretty weird.
Yeah. Like who else could compete with that?
I didn't start collecting really until probably around Revised. Like I could have done the other things, but it was just not popular enough in my elementary school until around then.
Yeah, that's that you had to have a crowd of other kids playing it really. Like my same nerd friends who I play D&D with and still play with to this day online, it was during like the Urza saga, and they brought some of those pre-con decks to school one day, and we were all playing at lunch, and then that's how I was like,
the
I love
Urza
this game.
cycle.
Yes.
Yeah, that was out when I was in I want to say high school.
Yeah. So we're probably similar in age.
Yeah,
then.
well, you said you graduated 25 years ago from high school, so you're a few years older than me, but about the same. I mean, you were naming TV shows that I was like, these are about at the same time as TV shows that I was seeing.
Yeah, I think we're the same era. Yeah, so it's weird
for sure.
Stuff was weird.
That's when
then.
I stopped collecting Magic. Was the Urza cycle? I was just like,
all right, I don't know where my cards
I've seen
are,
a lot of cycles, and they just keep going, and it's so much money.
So there's my unlimited edition box.
You savage.
I know, it's so broken, but check this out. These are all my dual lands. And I got
you would need to like lock those in a fireball.
Pages of dual lands and strip mines.
That's like college tuition right there.
Like, yeah.
It's so much, and yeah, like my collection went up in flames, literally. But I'm sure it was worth way less than Steven's. But the insurance adjusters did not have to be convinced that the Magic cards were valuable, because it was already at the maximum amount that they would pay out anyway. But I was thinking that it would be difficult to convince them how much that, and like it actually hurt my soul to see how much the two first edition holographic Charizard Pokemon cards that were also in there were worth after the fact, because I had assumed that Pokemon cards probably would like not retain their value because like the card game was not that fun.
No. But
it's just very high.
I cannot believe you had one.
Here's my vintage deck. Let's see. I got a dual land. I got a dual land. Dual land. Dual land. Another dual. Whoops.
There's a Bayou. I see that.
Land.
That was one of the dual lands I actually had. Bayous and
dual
Savannahs,
land. Dual land. Dual land.
Oh my gosh.
Dual land.
This is your whole deck, you monster.
Wait, and then counterspell.
Oh, the string cheese counterspell. Your cheese whiz counterspell. Power sing.
Power. Wait, and then we'll get to the good ones in a sec. Cities of Brass.
It's a beautiful card. It's a black border.
Is that Regrowth?
Regrowth, yeah.
Regrowth. What is that? That is Tranquility.
Is that?
Yeah, Tranquility.
Yeah. I can't read it from here, so I have to recognize the
Disintegrate.
What's your win condition?
Lightning Bolt.
I'll tell you in a second. Lightning Bolt. Card Apes.
Lightning Bolt.
Card Apes.
Yep, Card. Well, you're gonna be like, yeah, my deck does work. There we go. Now we're gonna get to the good ones. Ancestral Recall. Force Fields. Oh, wait, hold on.
I'm like, you could win, but how do you really do it?
Yeah, like what are you exactly doing here? Like,
Gems.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And then
you got some punchy guys.
Yeah, and then this is more gems.
Yeah. We needed to see the green because otherwise it was just in there for like the Tranquility.
This actually is not my full deck. This is the part. So no, it
is this like a 4-color deck? You're just like
5-color.
Oh, it's 5 color.
Yeah. Well, back then you could do 5-color. Everyone did 5-color.
Yeah.
It is. I called it the deck of pain. So I would be able to get out very fast, big monsters like the Jins, the 5/5s. That do a point of damage to every turn that you go. So I had the Curd Apes. I had the City of Brass. I have the Lightning Bolts. I had Forest Curd Apes would come out and they would become 2/3s. So they would eat up other people's Lightning Bolts. And so what I would end up doing is coming out and just going. It was just the Zerg attack. Like I would come out and be faster than you. That was basically it. And I would average about 11 points of damage to myself before I killed them. So I would end up killing myself as fast as I was killing them. And the point was, as long as I killed them before I died, I won. And that's how it worked. So
it looks like a good I forget what we were calling stuff where it was just like
here
a
it is.
good
Here's my
stuff
time
deck.
walk. The one that fell on the floor,
yeah.
the time walk.
Oh geez, don't. I can't believe that. That's so wild. Like, yeah, what is it? Ah man, I'm trying to remember
Another
now
city
all
of
the weird
brass.
terms
Just
we
sitting
had.
around.
There's a Reddit that I look at but don't like actually participate in, that's like vintage magic. It's like I forget where it cuts off, but it cuts off at, I don't know, Arabian
Oh, you know what
Nights
comes
or
out
something.
today? Oh no, well no, it goes up. It doesn't go to Arabian Nights. It goes to usually right around Ice Age or Legends is like where it stops, because that's where people's like that's the cutoff point. But Lorcana comes out today.
Oh, I don't know a thing about Lorcana except that it caused a lot of turmoil at Gen Con.
Yes, it caused death and destruction.
So
Oh,
much
boy.
turmoil.
Oh wait, here we go. I was like, where's my good cards? Here we go. Now we'll get to the juicy stuff.
Someone commented about sliver decks. I remember
Mana Vault.
those.
There's the bait. There's the
You
Mox.
crazy person. You have these in normal sleeves. Like,
Look at that. Just hanging out. There's like, la da 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 da. Oh, there's my beta Emerald Mox, by the way. Soul Ring. Mishra's Factories.
how do you even not be? How do you play with these decks, or are you like
Sometimes,
are you
yeah, I
afraid
used to
bend
play.
them?
Yeah, I play Vintage once in a while.
Mhm.
The problem with Vintage, so I do Mishra's Factory when I play Vintage. The problem with playing Vintage is it's like literally by the first turn, it's like, oh, I won or I lost. Like you don't even have to play. Like you're like, I don't even have to play. Like oh, it's over. Like you just know it's so fast, and the meta, it's
know.
just like it's just
totally zero sum. Like
yeah,
you
it's
just
so
you either win or
quick.
you don't based on your
Yeah.
opening hand.
Yeah,
which
yeah,
that's what I played.
yeah.
Was Vintage. I
Yeah.
would do Vintage tournaments, Star
Yeah.
City Power 9 tournaments and stuff, and
Yeah,
they were
City,
fun.
yeah.
But it's so weird. If I was gonna jump back into Magic these days, I would probably. I don't know if I can help myself. I guess this is the kind of person I am. I would probably
wait.
invent my own format.
This is actually this is the one before Unlimited. This is
Wow.
this is like version 2 or something. Wait, I think
Wow.
wait, you ready? Look at this. I got
the backs of the boxes look like the back of the like AD&D books.
look at this.
Oh,
Garfield
geez,
Games. It's actually Garfield Games. That's how old they. And look at the size of this instruction manual. And look at the font. The font is like, it was so hard to learn how to play. And this is the instructions. The instructions are gigantic. I remember sitting there trying to read this. It's 35 pages of instructions of how to play Magic. It was like, good luck. Good luck trying to figure out how to play.
It was hard even when we had someone teaching you back then.
This was my first deck I ever bought. Ever. And it still
That is
has
so cool.
alphas and betas in it. Yeah, look.
That's wild.
Look, all black border.
You are crazy. How do you do it? I would play a pauper format because I'd want to buy all the cards like on like eBay for like 3 cents each and have like a lot of rules about what could be done. I feel like that would lead to a lot of creativity if you're like, it's open, like any edition, or what do they call them? Any what do they call them anymore? Editions?
Yeah, no, they call them editions.
Yeah, any edition, but it has to be commons, and then we're gonna restrict or ban the ones that are even remotely powerful, and then go ahead, see what you do.
Yep. No, the one I like to play, I play draft, because draft is the one that you can actually, it's even, it's fun, it's different every time. That's the only one I play if I do play. I got back into it about 10 years ago, right when it was actually really good. 10 years ago was like right when it was like Ravnica, and there was a couple of really good sets about 10 years ago, but I haven't played it since. And I tried,
Sets.
Sets.
That's what they're sets. Yep.
It just comes off the tongue after a while. But
Dang, I'd probably be really horrible and be like, you can have all your lands in a separate deck and you can play the top one each turn.
yeah.
And then you draw 5 or something at the
The
beginning.
problem with Magic, it's really good, but unfortunately, the thing that makes it is the thing that kills it. It's the lands, having the land as part of your deck. And that's been the big change in all these games is that the mana progression and the magic are separate than the spells. It's the Hearthstone where it's like you get one per turn, so it's much more even. Because there's nothing worse than too many lands or not enough. Like that's the big issue with Magic, and it always has been and never will be. It'll never not be a problem. It's like always when you get flooded or you just don't have the color you need, as opposed to.
And it kind of stinks to lose a game due to that. It doesn't feel very satisfying. Like,
it always happens.
It's the same as I used to play 40K. I used to play Warhammer 40K when I was in like high school and stuff, and I remember being like, wow, we invested 4 hours into playing this game where people were either like mad or exulting over poor dice rolls or their enemies' poor dice rolls. And then it was one of those games where I'm like, I don't know if I ever felt good after playing 40K. Like, I know it sounds blasphemous, but you invest so much into making your army and so much time into playing one game. And then you like just every poor roll that you make just feels like a personal attack by your dice for some reason, and then there's something dissatisfying about it, and I ended up just not playing. I quit playing it. In
fact, they're saying because Lorcana comes out, Lorcana has a mechanic which is a good balance, is that any card can be used as land. So all your cards are cards, but then you have to decide which ones to sacrifice because those get turned into ink, they call it, and then you basically turn your card into ink, and then it can't be used. It can only be used for mana, and so that's the way to do it. But well, we can go on forever, but I think people are starting to get bored. And also, I can't believe we went on.
You can tell based on how many people are still watching.
It was actually, it only started to go down, I think, when the Magic cards came out. It's like
First, it went down a little bit with the ship music, possibly because it was loud.
I messed up.
And then it went down by way more with the Magic cards.
Everyone's like, "Oh, they're talking about Magic. We got to get out of here."
Well,
I do have to go pick my dog up.
Oh yeah, no, that's fine. I actually have to go because my dogs are both sitting here.
I've got to eat dinner.
My dogs are waiting for me to feed them dinner.
Oh,
but we're 1,200 away from the final goal, so it's going to be worth it. It's a 200-page lore book, okay? Because I'm insane.
Over 280 pages. It
280 pages.
It has a lot of mechanics.
Who does that? Who writes? Like, no one writes lore books as big. Like, because at first I was like, I'll make
Actually, Paizo does. Like, their two longest
some
Lost
of them.
Omens books. Impossible Lens and Wongi Spence are longer.
Impossible Lens is longer?
They're both longer. Yes.
Well, one could say
it is not that common. Much longer, but those are the only two, and there's like 10.
I'm not even coming close. 342.
Yeah,
344 pages.
Much longer.
This is a great book, though. This book is so good. Yeah. I love it.
So I happen to know which ones. I always forget Absalom because it was
Absalom
delayed by multiple years.
Absalom does not count because Absalom is like. In a weird way, it's not that I don't like Absalom. I like it for what it is, but it's one book on a city. And that's not as much fun, in my opinion, as a land. Because you can get a lot of cool things from lands, but I don't like to do city adventures, personally. I guess if you like city adventures, it's interesting. But I like traveling lands. I like the World of Warcraft Bulgarian approach, where, for 2 or 3 levels, you're in the forest area. And then the next levels, you're in the... This is what Zelda does, It's like, or Mario. It's like, now you're in the swamp. Now you're in the desert. Now you're in space. It's like you got to mix it up. You don't want to be in the same place all the time. It gets boring. So, but we got to figure something out. We got to write some adventures for Kelsey. Because I'm trying to think, how am I going to write a 2 or 3 or 4 page adventure? That sounds crazy.
Well, I should say mine are like, when I write like a 30, 35 room dungeon, they're usually around like 16 pages. It's mine. And part of that's due to the formatting and possibly due to it being a digest size booklet. But no, I mean, yeah, I don't feel like, I don't make an enormous effort to not give information about the game. It's like...
Yeah. Well, I already have.
Steven, I'll tell you what, Steven, we can tag team it. You draw a map because that is the last thing I will ever do, and I'll write the dungeon for you, and I'll make it fit.
I don't know. Well, I don't know how long it would take. I wasn't maybe him, Vanessa, or someone write it. But the I already have
Like,
this kind
I
of
can
concept.
write a dungeon. That writing it is not that hard.
Yeah, they're
I
actually
just
pretty
am.
easy.
I am really, really terrible at drawing.
Well, I have
And
one.
so
I have one
takes,
better.
It takes me 10 times longer than it takes anyone else.
I got one better. I'll have John Stats do the map for us. John Stats did all the dungeons in World of Warcraft. And he's like my best friend.
John Stats draw a map.
I would love to see his
I can write a
He was
quick,
at dinner with
have him draw a
us.
small
He was the
map.
bald guy.
Don't do
He was sitting
35
next to me.
rooms, make it smaller, and we'll do it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, seriously.
Hey,
Like he literally is a professional. Like there's probably more people on planet Earth that have played his dungeons than any one of us combined. Like everyone combined, because it's like all the dungeons in Vanilla WoW. Every single one he made. Every single one.
that's absolutely mind-boggling.
Yeah, and and his new book. He's writing a series, and it's the World of Dungeons. And he has a board game he came out, which is Dungeons. Like that's his thing is dungeons. That's all he does. So I'll say, John, make me a dungeon. He'll be like, okay, and we will do it in like no time. So
teach us your ways. Yeah.
Well, we know that's the thing. When you're in this industry, you know weird people. Like it's like I need to make a dungeon. I'm like I know a guy who like literally does it for a living. He makes dungeons, and he's really good at it. It's like I need someone who could write an ancestry. I'm like I got someone who does that too. It's like just weird in this world. But I actually have an idea because what you want to do is you want to have multiple stories and conflicts within the dungeons. And I usually like the dungeons where you say if you go in and like one side's like the were-rats and the other side is the goblins and they're fighting with each other. Then of course, while you're going through, you uncover the hidden vampire that's been there all along, and everyone's like, oh my god, and then that thing is just ripping through everyone. And so you have multiple conflicts and multiple, because then it is story, and you have a story of different factions within a dungeon. That's the type of stuff I do, because then it's like interesting too. It's like, ooh, we're actually like learning stuff. So
absolutely. Yeah, factions are like crucial in my opinion to like a genuine good dungeon experience, because the characters need something to do besides fight. They should be able to talk to the NPCs, make alliances. So those are the most fun kinds of games. So
yeah, that's what I would do. And
all right,
not that hard. All right, well, we're getting close. We're almost there, people. And let's see. Ends tonight. Go to Kickstarter, and we'll get
.rollforcombat.com
1/50th of what Kelsey got on hers. But fine. It's fine. It's only one book.
we'll see if I can ever do something like that again. I'll try, but I don't know.
Well, you also had a lot of content. That's the thing. It's like that's the problem. It's like when you do it, not a problem, but it's like when you do it and you have a lot of content, it's hard to do it again if you're only going to put out like one or two books. It's like you kind of need to
spend the time making something that's got a lot to it.
Yeah.
Even it's more like 1/15th. That's a lot more than 1/50th. That's like over 3 times as much.
Hey!
I was being overly dramatic for effect, just to emphasize how much she did on hers.
It was a fantastic Kickstarter and a cool game.
Thank you. Thank you. And you guys too. You guys are prolific, and it's just so cool to get to talk to you both like, through a chance meeting at Gen Con. We now all have gotten to have a discussion like this, which just goes to show that we work in a cool industry.
It is definitely an interesting industry, to say the least. We have weird jobs. We're like sitting, Mark and I will say that. We're like sitting and like discussing like, I don't know, how dragons, like magic of dragons work. And we're like, what a weird job.
I'm convinced that tabletop RPG writers are on a watch list because of things we've had to Google for games.
Oh, yeah.
Because like
Steve Jackson literally was.
The poisons in Pathfinder 2, I didn't write the initial drafts of them. Stephen Radney McFarlane did, but some of them were real world poisons. And they had like onset times and other things. And I was like, well, I have to check the work on this. So how will I make sure that the onset time is correct? And so I had to look up, like how long after someone takes hemlock poison does it usually take until they experience an effect? And fortunately, I found a website that was called like how to poison your fictional character for mystery authors.
Thank
And
goodness.
hopefully the fact that I clicked on that was if anyone was watching my search history was like explain things to me. But there are other things like dealing with like weather rules and environment, and I was like, okay, so Pathfinder 1, which is based on 3rd edition D&D, notoriously have like laughable Pacific Northwest ideas of what is a hot temperature that will cause you to take damage and what is a cold temperature that will cause you to take damage, that real world humans go way beyond some of those temperature ranges and clearly are not taking 1d6 damage every minute when it's like 95 degrees outside. Just like,
but they're also not wearing metal
temperature.
plate armor, so
Well, it's all about the humidity.
Some of your
okay?
characters, your wizard isn't. And
they might be wearing
but
they might be wearing wool robes. That's pretty bad in the summer.
They might, or they might not. If you look at some of that art, some of those characters definitely are not wearing very much. And I guess so I went online, I was like, how hot does it have to be before, like, looking at some of these timers on the damage, I was like, well, a commoner has this many hit points, like before you would die after a certain amount of time. Mm-hmm. And there are answers to those questions, which, like, apparently not only is there research on it, but like the people who did most of that research, like, originally were Nazis or something. It was like a rabbit hole of like really weird stuff. And it was like, I don't even want to keep following this, but we can change what the temperatures are on the core rulebook to not be the same ones from Pathfinder First Edition.
Well, keep in mind, don't you remember, Steve Jackson Games was raided by the Secret Service because of the things they were looking up.
Oh yeah,
for the Illuminati card game or something.
No, it was something else, and they were raided.
Oh,
I remember.
Do you remember that?
I remember hearing about it. I don't remember it happening.
No, it was totally.
I didn't know.
Oh, you didn't know that? That's like super famous.
What game was it for, though? Now
I'm looking it up.
It wasn't Shadowrun.
Yeah, they actually
they were raided by the U.S. Secret Service
as
part of a nationwide investigation of data piracy.
Yeah, it's right, and there was
but
in
it
1990.
Turns out that a federal court awarded damages and attorney's fees to the game company,
because they were researching
careless, illegal, and completely unjustified.
No, they were researching GURPS Cyberpunk.
Yes.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, and one of the computers was the one running the Illuminati BBS.
Yes,
because of GURPS Cyberpunk. And
they had 3 of their computers were seized and 300 floppy disks, and they sued, and they just came in and took everything. And it's like, there's no internet back then. So they're like, can you imagine? They just literally came in because they were like, oh, what are you researching? They thought they were like attacking and doing like a computer fraud.
Oh, it's because they canvassed to talk to computer security experts and self-confessed computer crackers.
Yes.
To try to make GURPS Cyberpunk more accurate.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they were raided, because of it was guilt by remote association was the cause.
They also called the GURPS Cyberpunk a handbook for computer crime. And they said this was real. They thought that they were literally putting out a handbook to figure out how to use modern real life credit card abusing over the over the computer systems.
Wow.
You see?
Wow.
That's where you know that, Mark. Yeah, that's like, because he talks about it. He talks about it all the time. And I forgot which game. He actually made a game out of that because it was like it was a really big thing at the time. I remember when it happened and people were going crazy. And then the electronic, the EFF came involved. Like everyone stepped up. Like all the, groups of today, like they all defended him and they sued them. And it went pretty far. They won. Steve Jackson Games won $300,000 back in 1994. It was like $1 million.
That was like $1 million.
Yeah, it was like $1 million. So there you go. Well, because they were basically intercepting their email messages and then burst down and that started a lot of the laws that are like today. His is one of the first ones where they were like sort of surveilling him illegally. They were just doing it without a warrant. So.
Oh my gosh.
Anyhow.
What a strange industry we work in. Hey.
Yep.
All right. Well,
Well, Steven, you've got to be able to feed your dogs.
I know. I got to feed my dogs. You got to feed your
Yeah.
dogs. Everyone's got to
Gotta all
feed
get the
themselves and dogs. And
Yes.
and I was gonna say, if you ever want to play, there's my favorite board game. This game called Oathsworn, and it is basically role playing OSR. It's insanely hard. You die. It's brutal. The world is atrocious, and the combat's fantastic. And you make characters. It's great, and you can play it online. There's an actual board game, but you can play it online, and it is so freaking good. It's so good. And the professional actors from Game of Thrones read the narration of the game. And I don't even read it. When I play, I just do the narration from him because he does such a better job. And the sound effects and everything. It's like playing a movie. It's awesome. So
Dang, I should check that out. Oathsworn.
Oathsworn. Yeah, it's really good. Of all those Gloomhaven types, and there's so many of those, that's my favorite one. And if you look, the reviews are all the same. They like, that's the best one of them all. It's really good. All right. Check it out. The
right.
Kickstarter. It's going to end tonight at midnight. And we're very close. Kickstarter. And
5 hours to go.
check it out. And if we don't make it, we don't make it. And then there's no poisoner. No poison class that Mark would write.
Toxicant Sentinel archetype.
Yes.
Mark had to risk his career researching.
Well,
no, not really. That was a different thing. But
it could be. I can ask you to really look up some nasty poisons, Mark, and find the worst things you can. Let's look into find all the attacks that have occurred, find out what poisons they used, and let's put it into this archetype. Oh my God, we were talking so long that Mark's background went from white to black.
I know, it's like nighttime over there practically.
I know.
It's
Like, where are
nighttime
you?
now. You just took so long.
We took so long. He's like,
Maryland.
it's literally become dark where he lives.
It is the dinner hour.
It is,
But
obviously.
For me, it's still the late brunch hour, I think. But
Yeah. Well, we're on the same time zone. My dogs are sleeping, so they're.
I'm in the same
complaining.
time zone too.
I know you and I are the same time zone, so my dogs are just sleeping, waiting for me.
Yeah.
All right.
you
Bye,
guys, thank you for having me
everyone.
on.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for being on.
Yeah.
This is awesome.
All right.
People in the chat are saying you should come on again.
Yes. Well,
I would be happy to.
all right. Every week. We do this every week. No, I'm kidding. We do it every week, but got to mix it up. Can't have a Kelsey on every week. Then it would just be the Kelsey show.
I'd run out of cool stories eventually. So.
Nah, you'd be surprised. We've been doing this
No,
for
the
years.
secret that
We never
Steven
run-
has is
we-
that he has
I
like the
repeat
same
them.
set of stories that he just will eventually repeat them.
You have these people had a bingo card for like when I do certain things because
Yeah.
you end up repeating yourself but not everyone watches and people like to hear the repeated stories because then they
That's
feel like
right.
they know you.
If you've never heard them, it's your first time hearing them.
That's right. You never know.
Mm-hmm.
But there's still new stories. No one knew I was born at midnight. There
That's
you go.
true. That was a
See?
totally new story.
That's a totally new story.
Hey!
I always have new
Nice.
things. All right. Oh, we're almost there. We just got some more done now. 1100. 1100 away.
So close.
And then
You guys will
next
do it.
week we'll have Questing Beast on and we'll talk more OSR. We'll talk Knave. All right.
All right. Bye, everybody.